The blood on her wedding dress wasn't hers. Not yet. Elena Moretti stood in a penthouse made of glass and lies, staring at the man who'd just become her husband, a stranger whose empire was built on corpses, including her mother's. Lorenzo Vescari didn't touch her, didn't smile. He simply watched, like a predator deciding whether to strike or wait. Outside, Rome glittered with oblivious lights. Inside, she'd just married the devil who knew exactly who she was before she ever walked down that aisle. And someone was coming to finish what they'd started 15 years ago. If you want to see how this story unfolds, stick with me until the very end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. What? The wedding had been beautiful in the way funerals sometimes are. All white roses and silent witnesses, expensive and cold. Elena had worn the dress they'd chosen for her, walked the path they'd designed, and spoken vows she didn't mean to a man she'd met exactly twice before. Both times, Lorenzo Vescari had looked at her the way scientists look at specimens under glass, with interest, but no warmth. Now, 6 hours later, she stood in his penthouse, their penthouse, she supposed, though the word felt like a lie in her mouth, and stared out at the city she'd loved her entire life. Rome sprawled beneath her like a sleeping beast, all amber lights and ancient shadows. From up here, 40 stories above the streets where she'd grown up, it looked peaceful. Beautiful, even. She knew better. You should eat something. Lorenzo's voice came from behind her, smooth and low. He hadn't raised it once during the entire wedding reception, yet people had scattered from his path like startled birds. Elena didn't turn around. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since this morning. How would you know? I pay attention. That made her turn. Lorenzo stood by the bar cart pouring amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses. He'd removed his jacket and tie, rolled his shirt sleeves to his elbows. Even in this casual state, he looked controlled, deliberate. Everything about him was measured, from the gray threading his dark hair to the way he moved through space like he owned it. He probably did. Men like Lorenzo Vescari owned everything they touched. You were watching me? Elena crossed her arms, suddenly aware of how the silk robe she'd changed into clung to her skin. The bedroom they'd assigned her was through the door to her left, separate from his, she'd been relieved to discover. During our wedding? It was my wedding, too. He walked toward her, offering one of the glasses. And you're my wife now. Watching you is part of the arrangement. She took the glass but didn't drink. The arrangement. Is that what we're calling it? Would you prefer contract? Transaction? His dark eyes held hers, unreadable. We could call it a marriage if that makes you more comfortable, but we both know what this is. A business deal. Protection, he corrected quietly. For you. Elena laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. Protection. From what exactly? You keep saying that, you and my father both, but no one will tell me what I'm supposedly being protected from. From the same people who killed your mother. The words dropped between them like stones into still water. Elena's fingers tightened on the glass, the crystal pressing into her palm. My mother died in a fire. An accident. Is that what your father told you? It's what the investigators said, what the police said. But even as she spoke, Elena felt something cold unfurl in her chest. Her father's face at the funeral, closed and terrible. The way they'd moved 6 months later, suddenly and without explanation. The bodyguards that had appeared when she was 12, then disappeared just as abruptly when she turned 18. The way her father had looked when he'd told her about the marriage arrangement. Not apologetic, desperate. Lorenzo watched her process this, his expression unchanged. Your mother, Vittoria Moretti, worked as a bookkeeper for several businesses in Rome. One of them was owned by the Santoro family. Have you heard that name? Elena shook her head. Good. That means you were hidden well. He took a slow sip of his drink. Vittoria discovered the Santoros were using her accounts to launder money. Millions of euros filtered through legitimate businesses. She collected evidence. She was going to expose them. You're lying. But Elena's voice wavered. The fire started in 3 places simultaneously. Professional accelerants. The investigation was closed in 48 hours. The lead inspector retired 2 weeks later to a villa in Sardinia he couldn't possibly afford. Lorenzo's voice remained level, factual, like he was reciting a grocery list instead of dismantling her entire childhood. Your mother didn't die in an accident, Elena. She was murdered because she was brave enough to seek the truth. The glass slipped from Elena's fingers. Lorenzo moved faster than she would have thought possible, catching it before it hit the marble floor. When he straightened, he was close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Why are you telling me this? Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Because you deserve to know why you're here. He set both glasses on the nearby table. And because the Santoro family knows your father is dying. Cancer, stage 4. 6 months. Maybe less. They've waited 15 years, but they're patient men. Once he's gone, you become a loose end. A witness who might remember too much, ask too many questions. I don't remember anything. I was 8 years old. You were in the house that night. Did you know that? Elena's breath caught. No, she didn't know that. Couldn't have known that because she had no memory of that night at all. Just a blank space where hours should have been, and a vague recollection of waking up in a hospital bed with her father's hand gripping hers too tight. The fire department found you in a closet, Lorenzo continued. Your mother had hidden you there. You survived because she made sure you would. Stop. Elena pressed her hands to her temples. Just stop. You asked what you needed protection from. Now you know. And marrying you protects me how exactly? What are you, some kind of saint? The words came out harsh, defensive. She needed them to be. Otherwise, she might shatter right there on his pristine marble floor. Something flickered across Lorenzo's face. Not quite a smile, but close. No one has ever accused me of sainthood, Elena. I'm the head of the Viscari family. We control most of the port trade in southern Italy, along with construction contracts, several shipping companies, and various other enterprises. Some legal, many not. You're a criminal. Yes. The casual admission should have terrified her. Instead, it steadied something inside her. At least he was honest about what he was. The Viscaris and the Santoros have been enemies for 3 generations, Lorenzo said. When your father approached me about a marriage alliance, I saw an opportunity. The Santoros won't touch you while you're under my protection. It would be declaring open war, and they're not ready for that. Not yet. So I'm a chess piece. Elena met his eyes. A pawn you're using against your enemies. A queen, he corrected softly. The most powerful piece on the board. But yes, this marriage serves my purposes as well as your father's. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. At least that was something. Elena had spent the past 3 weeks since her father announced the arrangement feeling like she was drowning, like everyone around her was speaking a language she couldn't understand. This, at least, was clear. Brutal, but clear. What happens now? She asked. Now, you live here. You're safe within these walls. I have security on every floor, cameras covering every entrance. You can go out, but not alone. You can contact your father, your friends, but your communications will be monitored. Not by me, he added, seeing her expression. By my security team. Standard precaution. I'm a prisoner. You're protected. There's a difference. Is there? Elena looked around the penthouse, all sleek surfaces and expensive art, floor-to-ceiling windows that made her feel exposed despite being 40 stories up. This is a very pretty cage, Lorenzo, but it's still a cage. Would you prefer to be dead? The question, asked so matter-of-factly, sent ice down her spine. I'd prefer to have a choice. We rarely get what we prefer. He moved to the windows, looking out at the city. I didn't choose this life either, Elena. I inherited it. Along with all its debts and enemies and obligations, we work with what we're given. There was something in his voice, some old bitterness that made her look at him more closely. How old were you when you inherited? 16? Younger than she was now. Elena was 23, had just finished her university degree in art history, had been planning to apply for positions at museums and galleries. She'd had a future stretching out before her, full of possibility. Now she had this. A husband who was essentially a stranger. A penthouse that felt like a tomb. And the knowledge that her mother had been murdered. I want to see the evidence, she said suddenly. About my mother. The investigation files, whatever you have. I want to see it. Lorenzo turned to study her. Why? Because if what you're saying is true, if she really was killed for trying to expose criminals, then I deserve to know the whole story, not just the pieces you think I should know. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then slowly, he nodded. All right, I'll have my people compile everything, but Elena... He waited until she met his eyes. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. That knowledge will change you. Are you sure that's what you want? I stopped being sure of anything the day my father told me I was getting married, she replied. At least this way, I'll know the truth. The truth isn't always kind. Neither is ignorance. Something that might have been respect crossed his face. Fair enough. You'll have the files tomorrow. He checked his watch, a gesture so normal, so mundane, that it jarred against everything else about this surreal conversation. It's late. You should rest. Will you... Elena stopped, unsure how to even phrase the question. I have my own room, Lorenzo said, understanding. This marriage is for protection, not anything else. You have my word on that. Relief flooded through her so strongly she felt dizzy. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We're bound together now, Elena, whether we like it or not. That comes with complications you haven't even begun to understand. He left her then, disappearing into the opposite wing of the penthouse. Elena stood alone in the living room, surrounded by glass and marble and the glittering lights of Rome, and wondered what kind of complications could possibly be worse than what she'd already learned tonight. She would find out soon enough. Well, the files arrived the next morning, delivered by a woman named Sophia, who introduced herself as Lorenzo's assistant. She was 40, elegant, with sharp eyes that cataloged everything about Elena in approximately 3 seconds. Signor Viscari asked me to provide these to you, Sophia said, setting a leather portfolio on the dining table. He also wanted me to inform you that he's been called away on business, but will return this evening. In the meantime, if you need anything, you can reach me at this number. She produced a card from her jacket pocket. Elena took it. What kind of business? The kind that keeps you safe, Signora Viscari. Sophia's smile was polite, professional, and utterly impenetrable. I've also been asked to review security protocols with you. Do you have a few minutes? The protocols, as it turned out, were extensive. Elena learned about the panic buttons installed in every room, the security team stationed on the 40th floor, the armored car and train driver available for any trips outside the penthouse. She learned which doors required biometric scans, which elevators were restricted, which floors of the building were off limits. By the time Sophia left, Elena's head was spinning. She made herself coffee, the kitchen was absurdly well stocked for a man who apparently never cooked, and finally opened the portfolio. The first document was a police report dated 15 years ago. She recognized the address, her childhood home in Trastevere. Reading the dry, clinical language, accelerants detected at 3 points of origin, victims identified through dental records, made her stomach turn. Victims, plural, her mother, and someone else. Elena flipped through pages until she found the second name, Marco Santoro, age 32, occupation listed as business consultant. What were you doing in my house? She murmured to the photograph clipped to the file. Marco Santoro had been handsome in a conventional way, with slicked back hair and an expensive suit. He looked like 100 other men in Rome. He died in the same fire that killed her mother. The next file was thicker. Financial records, photocopies of ledgers in her mother's precise handwriting. Elena wasn't an accountant, but even she could see the discrepancies. Money flowing in from one source, flowing out to another, the amounts never quite matching. Her mother had highlighted certain entries in yellow, made small notations in the margins. She'd known. Vittoria had known exactly what she was looking at. Why didn't you just quit? Elena asked the empty room. Why did you have to be brave? But she knew the answer, didn't she? Because her mother had been good. Truly, deeply good, in a way that seemed almost quaint now. She'd believed in rules and consequences, in justice and accountability. She'd seen something wrong and couldn't look away. It had gotten her killed. Elena was reading through a witness statement, a neighbor who'd reported seeing 2 men leaving the property shortly before the fire was reported, when she heard the front door open. She tensed automatically, then remembered. Lorenzo had said he'd return this evening. He appeared in the dining room doorway, still wearing his suit but looking tired in a way he hadn't last night. His eyes went to the files spread across the table, then to her face. You've been reading, he observed, all day. Elena gestured at the documents. There was someone else in the house, Marco Santoro. The reports say he died in the fire, too. He did. What was he doing there? Lorenzo loosened his tie, moving to pour himself a drink from the bar cart. Killing your mother, most likely. The theory is that something went wrong. Maybe she fought back, maybe the accelerants ignited faster than planned. Either way, he got trapped too. So he's dead. The man who killed my mother is dead. One of them. Marco was an enforcer, not a decision maker. Someone sent him. Someone who's still alive. Elena stared at this photograph of Marco Santoro, trying to feel something. Rage, satisfaction, anything. Instead, she just felt hollow. Who? His father. Domenico Santoro. He runs the family now. Lorenzo took a long drink. He's the one you need to worry about. Because I was there that night. Because you're Vittoria's daughter. Because as long as you exist, you're a reminder of what they did. And men like Domenico don't like reminders. Elena closed the file, suddenly unable to look at it anymore. Did you know her? My mother? No, our families didn't overlap much in those days. But I've heard stories. People who worked with her said she was kind, fair, the sort of person who remembered everyone's birthday. He paused. I'm sorry you lost her. The kindness in his voice undid something in her. Elena felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. Don't be nice to me right now. I can't handle that. Lorenzo set down his glass and crossed to her. For a moment, she thought he might touch her, offer some gesture of comfort, but he didn't. He simply stood there, a solid presence in her peripheral vision. "My mother died when I was 14, he said quietly. "Cancer. I used to think that was better, somehow, that at least I got to say goodbye. But grief is grief, Elena. There's no good way to lose someone you love." She looked up at him. "What about your father?" "Murdered, 2 years later. That's when I inherited." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He was a brutal man. The world didn't lose much when he died." Lorenzo's voice was flat, emotionless. "I learned early that the people we're supposed to trust can be the ones who hurt us most." There was a story there, Elena realized. Something dark and complicated lurking beneath the careful control he wore like armor. But before she could ask, a phone buzzed. Lorenzo pulled it from his pocket, his expression hardening as he read whatever message had appeared. "I need to make a call," he said abruptly. "We'll talk more at dinner." He left her alone with the files and her spiraling thoughts. Elena gathered the documents back into the portfolio, handling them carefully, like they might burn her. In a way, they already had. Everything she'd believed about her childhood, about her mother's death, had been incinerated by the truth. Her mother hadn't died in an accident. She'd been murdered for being good, for choosing truth over safety. And now Elena was married to a criminal, living in a glass cage, protected by the same kind of man who'd destroyed her family. The irony tasted like ashes. Dinner was a quiet affair. Lorenzo had ordered in from what he claimed was the best restaurant in Rome. Elena wouldn't know. She'd never been able to afford eating there. They sat at opposite ends of the long dining table, an expanse of polished wood between them. "You didn't have to eat with me," Elena said, breaking the silence. "I assume you have more important things to do." "Probably." He cut into his steak with precise movements. "But we're married now. We should at least pretend to be a couple occasionally." "Why? No one's watching." "Someone is always watching." Lorenzo gestured vaguely at the windows. "We live in a glass house, Elena. Everything we do is visible to anyone who cares to look." She followed his gaze to the windows, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. "That doesn't bother you?" "I've learned to live with it. You will too." "I don't want to learn to live with it. I want my life back." "That's not an option." The bluntness stung, maybe because it was true. Elena set down her fork, appetite gone. "So what? I just stay here forever? A prisoner in a penthouse, married to a stranger, waiting for some criminal to decide I'm not worth killing?" "You make it sound so bleak." "Isn't it?" Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, studying her across the table. "You could make it less so. This doesn't have to be a prison, Elena. You're free to pursue your interests, your work. I'm not trying to control your life. Just save it, whether I want you to or not. Would you prefer I'd let your father's request for help go unanswered? Let the Santoros come for you?" "I'd prefer to have been given a choice." The words came out louder than she'd intended, echoing in the high-ceilinged room. Lorenzo didn't flinch. He simply watched her, waiting. "You want to know what makes me angry?" Elena continued, the words spilling out now. "Not the marriage, not even the danger. It's that everyone, my father, you, all of this, everyone decided what was best for me without asking what I wanted. Like I'm a child who can't be trusted with the truth." "You're right," Lorenzo said, surprising her. "You should have been told, should have been given time to process, to decide. But your father is dying, Elena. He's terrified. When people are afraid, they make choices that protect the people they love, not necessarily choices that respect them." "And what's your excuse?" "I don't have one. I agreed to this arrangement because it benefited me strategically. I won't pretend otherwise." He leaned back in his chair. "But I can promise you this. I won't lie to you. You want to know something? Ask. You want to do something? Tell me. We may not have chosen each other, but we're bound together now. We might as well try to make it bearable." It wasn't a declaration of affection or partnership. It was a business proposition, pragmatic and clear. Somehow, that made it easier to accept. "I want to visit my father," Elena said. "I'll arrange it. I want to finish my degree work. I had a thesis due before all this happened. We have a library. I'll have whatever books or resources you need delivered. I want—" She paused, unsure how to articulate it. "I want to understand all of this. Your world, the families, why this matters so much. If I'm going to be part of it, I should at least know what I'm part of." Lorenzo tilted his head, considering. "That's dangerous knowledge." "I'm already in danger. At least this way I'll know why." "All right, I'll teach you. But Elena—" He waited until she met his eyes. "Once you see how this world really works, you can't unsee it. You'll be complicit just by knowing." "Are you sure that's what you want?" She thought of her mother, collecting evidence, choosing truth even when it cost everything. "Yes, I'm sure. Then we start tomorrow." They finished dinner in silence, but it was a different quality of quiet now. Not quite comfortable, but less hostile. A truce, if not quite peace. That night, alone in her bedroom, Elena stood at the window and looked out at Rome. Somewhere in that sprawl of lights, her father was dying. Somewhere, men who'd killed her mother were planning what? She didn't know, couldn't know. But she would learn. She'd make herself strong enough, smart enough to understand the game being played with her life as the stakes. And maybe, eventually, she'd learn to play it herself. Behind her, through the walls, she could hear faint sounds of movement. Lorenzo, in his own room, dealing with his own demons. They were strangers bound by contract, living separate lives under the same roof. For now. The education began at breakfast. Lorenzo spread a newspaper across the table, tapping an article about a dock workers' strike in Naples. This, he said, is cover. The strike is real, but it's being orchestrated by the Santoro family to shut down my shipping routes. They'll let it go on for another week, maybe two, then offer to mediate a solution. In exchange, they'll want concessions. Elena studied the article. What kind of concessions? Access to my distribution networks. Information about my suppliers. Maybe a seat at the table for some of their people in my organization. He sipped his coffee. They've been trying to expand north for years. This is just another move in that direction. And you'll refuse. Of course, which means the strike continues, my business suffers, and we both lose money until one of us blinks. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. Welcome to how wars are fought when you can't just shoot each other in the street. Over the following days, Elena received a crash course in the mechanics of organized crime. She learned about money laundering and shell corporations, about legitimate businesses used to hide illegal profits. She learned the names of the major families in Italy and their territories, the alliances and feuds that went back generations. Lorenzo taught her to read between the lines of news articles, to spot the hidden messages in seemingly innocent communications. He showed her how seemingly unrelated events, a restaurant closing, a property sale, a sudden retirement, could signal major shifts in the underworld's power structure. It's all connected, he explained one evening, spreading documents across his desk. Every action has a reaction. Every move creates an opportunity or a vulnerability. You have to think 3 steps ahead, always. Like chess, Elena murmured, studying the papers. Exactly like chess. Except in chess, you don't lose everything if you make a wrong move. She looked up at him. Have you? Made a wrong move? Many times. I'm still alive, so I must have done something right. It was the closest he'd come to admitting vulnerability, and Elena found herself curious despite everything. How did you survive? Taking over at 16, surrounded by people who probably wanted you dead? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant. I learned to be ruthless, to show no weakness. My father's enemies saw me as an easy target, young, inexperienced, soft. I had to prove them wrong quickly and definitively. What did you do? Things I'm not proud of, things that were necessary. He met her eyes. This life doesn't reward mercy, Elena. It rewards strength. I became what I needed to be to survive. And what's that? A monster, according to some. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was commenting on the weather. They're not entirely wrong. Elena thought about that as she lay in bed that night. Lorenzo Vescari was a criminal, a man who'd built an empire on illegal enterprises and violence. But he'd also been a 16-year-old boy thrust into a nightmare, forced to become something terrible just to stay alive. Which version was the truth? Or were they both true layered on top of each other like sediment? She was still pondering that question a week later when everything changed. It happened on a Tuesday. Elena had been living in the penthouse for 3 weeks, had fallen into something resembling a routine. Mornings with Lorenzo, learning the landscape of his world. Afternoons working on her thesis, trying to maintain some connection to her old life. Evenings eating dinner across that expansive table, the conversations gradually becoming less stilted. She'd even started to feel, if not safe, then at least stable. Foolish, in retrospect. She was in the library, a room lined with books Lorenzo admitted he'd never read but kept for appearances, when she heard shouting. Male voices, rapid-fire Italian, too fast and muffled for her to make out the words. Elena moved to the door, pressing her ear against it. The voices grew louder, more urgent. Then she heard Lorenzo, his voice sharp with command. Lock it down, now. No one in or out. Her heart kicked into a faster rhythm. She reached for her phone, but before she could decide who to call, the library door burst open. Sophia appeared, her usual composure cracked. Signora, we need to move you, quickly. What's happening? There's been a security breach. Please, we have to go. Sophia grabbed her arm, pulling her into the hallway. The penthouse had transformed. Men in dark suits moved with military precision, checking rooms, speaking into earpieces. Through the windows, Elena could see two black SUVs pulling up to the building's entrance. "Where's Lorenzo?" she demanded. "Dealing with the situation. This way." Sophia led her toward the back of the penthouse, to a door Elena had never noticed before. It opened onto a narrow stairwell, clearly meant for emergencies. They'd descended 3 floors when they heard it, a crack that echoed through the concrete, unmistakably a gunshot. Elena froze. "Was that?" "Keep moving." Sophia's voice was iron now, all pretense of the polite assistant gone. She had a gun in her hand. Elena hadn't even seen her draw it. They made it down 7 more floors before the stairwell door above them slammed open. Footsteps, multiple people, moving fast. Sophia pushed Elena against the wall, positioning herself between her and the stairs. "If I tell you to run," she said quietly, "you run. Don't look back. There's an exit on the 35th floor that leads to a parking garage. Take any car with keys in it and drive. Don't stop until you're at the address on the card I gave you. Understand?" Elena's mouth was too dry to speak. She nodded. The footsteps grew closer. Sophia raised her weapon, steady and professional. Then a voice from above. "Sophia, stand down." "Lorenzo." Sophia lowered her gun, relief flashing across her face. "Signore." He appeared on the landing above them, descending quickly. There was blood on his shirt, though Elena couldn't tell if it was his. His eyes found hers immediately. "Are you hurt?" "No." "What's happening?" "We're leaving, now." He took her arm, and together they continued down the stairs. Sophia followed, her weapon still drawn. "The penthouse?" Elena asked. "Compromised. They had someone inside the security team." Lorenzo's voice was tight with controlled fury. "We can't go back there." They emerged in the parking garage Sophia had mentioned. Lorenzo led them to a nondescript sedan, ushering Elena into the back seat before sliding in beside her. Sophia took the driver's seat, starting the engine before anyone had even closed their doors. As they pulled out of the garage, Elena looked back at the building, her home for the past 3 weeks. Through the windows, she could see figures moving in the penthouse, dark shapes against the lit interior. "Who were they?" she whispered. "Santoro's people." Lorenzo was texting rapidly on his phone. They knew exactly when to hit, exactly which guard to compromise. Someone fed them intelligence. A mole. Yes. The car merged into Rome's evening traffic, just another vehicle among thousands. But Elena felt exposed, vulnerable in a way the penthouse had never made her feel. At least there, she'd had walls and security systems and the illusion of safety. Now she had nothing but the man beside her and the woman driving, speeding through streets that had suddenly become enemy territory. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe, somewhere they won't think to look." Lorenzo finally looked up from his phone, his expression grim. "I'm sorry, Elena. I promised you protection, and I failed." "You're still alive, so am I. That's not failure." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or gratitude. "They were there for you. Did you know that? They had your photo, your description. This wasn't a random hit. They came specifically to take you." The words sent ice through her veins. "But you stopped them. This time." His jaw tightened. "The mole is still out there. Until I find them, until I know how deep the compromise goes, nowhere is truly safe." They drove for another hour, leaving Rome behind. Elena watched the city lights fade in the rearview mirror, replaced by darkness and the occasional small town. Finally, Sophia turned down a narrow road that wound up into hills, pulling up to a stone house that looked like it had been standing for centuries. "A safe house," Lorenzo explained, helping her out of the car. "It's not registered to me or any of my companies. Only 3 people know about it. 4 now." The interior was sparse but clean. Old furniture, thick walls, windows that were more like slits than modern glass. A fortress, Elena realized. This place had been built to withstand sieges. How appropriate. Sophia did a quick security check while Lorenzo locked the heavy wooden door. Elena stood in the middle of the main room, still trying to process what had just happened. "I need to make some calls," Lorenzo said. "Sophia will show you where you can rest." "I don't want to rest. I want to understand." Elena turned to face him. "You said they had intelligence, someone on the inside. How is that possible? Don't you vet your people?" "Extensively, which means either the vetting process is compromised, or someone I trusted has betrayed me." His voice was cold now, the careful control slipping to reveal something harder underneath. "I'll find out which. And when I do..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Be careful," Elena said quietly. "Revenge makes people reckless." "This isn't revenge. It's survival. If I don't respond to this, if I don't show strength, every enemy I have will see weakness. They'll come for me. For us." He moved closer, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw real emotion in his eyes. Not the careful neutrality, not the calculated consideration. Fear. I can't protect you if they don't fear me, Elena. Do you understand that? She did. In this world he'd shown her, the world of power and violence and ancient grudges, mercy was suicide. Compassion was weakness. You struck first and hard, or you died. What will you do? She asked. But I have to. He turned toward the door. Sophia will stay with you. Don't leave this house. Don't make any calls. Don't contact anyone. I'll be back tomorrow. Lorenzo. She waited until he looked back. Don't do anything you can't come back from. For a long moment, he just studied her, then, almost too quiet to hear, I passed that point years ago. He left her there, in a fortress in the hills, guarded by a woman with a gun and haunted by the blood on his shirt. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat by the narrow window, watching the darkness, wondering what Lorenzo was doing, what lines he was crossing, what pieces of himself he was burning away in the name of survival. And she wondered, with a clarity that terrified her, when she'd started to care. Lorenzo returned 36 hours later. Elena heard the car engine first, then voices, Lorenzo's and Sophia's, speaking too low to make out the words. She'd been in the safe house's kitchen, attempting to make coffee with the limited supplies available, when she heard the door open. She moved to the main room and stopped. Lorenzo looked like he'd aged years in a day and a half. His suit was rumpled, his face drawn, and there was something hollow in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He carried the smell of smoke with him. It's done, he said simply. What's done? The mole, the response, all of it. He moved past her to pour himself a drink from the single bottle of whiskey on the shelf. His hands, she noticed, were scraped raw. Elena waited, knowing he'd explain or he wouldn't. That was how Lorenzo worked. Everything on his terms, his timeline. The guard who sold us out was named Marco, he finally said. 26. Had worked for me for 3 years. I trusted him. He took a long drink. The Centauros paid him 50,000 euros to give them the security codes and tell them when you'd be alone. What happened to him? I'm not going to answer that. Which was an answer in itself. Elena felt her stomach turn but forced herself to ask the next question. And the Centauros? I hit 3 of their businesses last night, sent a message they can't ignore. Lorenzo's voice was flat, emotionless. They'll respond, of course. This won't end it, but it buys us time. Time for what? For me to find a more permanent solution. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression cracked. I'm sorry you're part of this, Elena. You deserve better than this world. We both do. That surprised him. She could see it in the way his eyes widened slightly, the way he seemed to really see her for the first time since entering the room. You think I deserve better? He asked quietly. I think you were 16 and terrified and did what you had to do to survive. I think you've been surviving for so long you've forgotten there might be other ways to live. Elena moved closer. But I also think you're more than what this life has made you. I've seen it. In the way you make sure I'm safe, the way you keep your word, the way you look sometimes when you think no one's watching, like you're tired of being the monster everyone expects. Lorenzo stared at her like she'd just spoken in a foreign language. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not, but I know what I see. What you see is a man who just destroyed 3 buildings and killed. He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Don't make me into something I'm not, Elena. I'm not a hero. I'm not even particularly good. I never said you were. But you're not just a monster either. You're human, complicated and flawed and trying to keep the people you care about safe in the only way you know how. She took a breath. That matters to me. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lorenzo set down his glass and crossed to her. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she could see every line of exhaustion on his face, every shadow under his eyes. You're too kind for this world, he said softly. And you're too cynical. Maybe we balance each other out. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Maybe. He left her then, heading to one of the safe house's back rooms to shower and sleep. But something had shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained, the professional detachment, had cracked. Elena wasn't sure if that was dangerous or inevitable. Probably both. They stayed at the safe house for a week. During that time, Elena learned more about Lorenzo Vescari than she had in all the weeks before. She learned that he'd taught himself to cook during those early years after his father's death, when he couldn't trust anyone enough to let them prepare his food. She learned that he read constantly, not the books that lined his penthouse library, but poetry and philosophy, worn paperbacks he kept hidden like secrets. She learned that he had nightmares. She could hear him sometimes, in the room next to hers, the sounds of restless sleep and sudden waking. He never mentioned it, and neither did she. In return, she told him about her own life, about university and her love of Renaissance art, about her friends and the future she'd imagined before all this, about the blank space in her memory where the night of the fire should be, and how sometimes she'd wake up feeling like she'd forgotten something crucial. The mind protects itself, Lorenzo said when she mentioned it. Sometimes forgetting is kinder than remembering. But what if I need to remember? What if there's something important I saw that night? Then it'll come back when you're ready to handle it, or it won't. Either way, you survived. That's what matters. They fell into an unexpected rhythm. Breakfast together, then Lorenzo would disappear for hours to make calls and handle business remotely. Afternoons, they'd sit in the safe house's small courtyard, and he'd continue her education in the mechanics of his world. Evenings, they'd make dinner together, a surprisingly domestic ritual that felt both natural and surreal. It was during one of these dinners that Sophia brought news. "We've identified the extent of the compromise," she reported, tablet in hand. "Marco was the only one on your immediate security team, but he'd been passing information to a Santoro lieutenant for 6 months. They know your routines, your properties, your associates." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "How deep?" "Deep enough that we need to assume everything is compromised. Bank accounts, safe houses, business dealings, all of it needs to be restructured. That'll take months." "Better months than a bullet." Sophia's voice was pragmatic. "And there's something else. Domenico Santoro has put out word that he wants to meet. Neutral ground, just the two of you." "It's a trap." "Probably, but he's offering a ceasefire while you consider it. No hits, no business interference. He seems serious." Lorenzo was quiet, thinking. Elena watched him process the information, saw the calculations happening behind his eyes. "What do you think he wants?" she asked. "To see if I'm weak enough to negotiate, or to get me in one place so he can finish this." He looked at Sophia. "Tell him I'll consider it. That buys us time to prepare either way." After Sophia left, Elena helped Lorenzo clear the dinner dishes. The silence between them was comfortable now, familiar. "Would you really meet with him?" she asked. "The man who had your mother killed?" Lorenzo paused, hands in the soapy water. "I've met with worse. In this life, you make deals with devils regularly. It's part of survival. But this is different. This is personal. Everything is personal. That's what makes it so dangerous." He dried his hands, turning to face her. "Domenico Santoro killed my mother to get to me, to try to destabilize my family when I was most vulnerable. He failed. But yes, if I thought I could end this without more bloodshed, I'd sit across a table from him and pretend to be civil. Even though you hate him. Especially because I hate him. Hatred is useful. It keeps you sharp, reminds you never to let your guard down." He studied her face. "Does that bother you? That I can hate someone and still work with them?" "No. It just makes me sad." "Why?" "Because it means you've never been able to just feel things. You've had to weaponize every emotion, turn everything into a tool for survival. That's exhausting." Lorenzo looked at her for a long moment. Then, in a voice so quiet she almost missed it, "Yes, it is." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Lorenzo's admission, about the cost of the life he'd been forced into. Around midnight, she gave up and went to the kitchen for water. She found him there, sitting at the small table with a glass of whiskey and a book of poetry. He looked up when she entered, unsurprised. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Too much thinking." She poured herself water, then, on impulse, sat across from him. "What are you reading?" He showed her the cover, Dante. Seemed appropriate. A man trapped in hell trying to find his way out. "Do you feel trapped?" "Every day." He closed the book. "But less so recently." "Well, since the wedding?" "Since you." The admission hung in the air between them. Elena's heart beat faster, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't understand." "Neither do I." Lorenzo looked at her with something like bewilderment. "I brought you into my life as a strategic move. Protection for you, leverage for me. That was the entirety of it. But somewhere in these past weeks, you've become more than that, and I don't know what to do with that. You could just let it be what it is, which is two people getting to know each other, learning to trust each other, maybe even becoming friends." Elena paused. "Unless that's not allowed in your world." "It's dangerous. People I care about become targets." "I'm already a target. Being your wife made me that, whether you care about me or not. That's different." "How?" Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Because the wife was part of the strategy. The person you're becoming to me, that's real. And real things can be taken away, used against me, destroyed. So you'd rather keep me at a distance, never let this become anything more than a business arrangement? I'd rather keep you alive. What if I'd rather live than just survive? The question clearly struck him. Elena saw it in the way his expression shifted, the way his carefully maintained control wavered. You're asking for something I don't know how to give, he said finally. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you that I see you, Lorenzo. Not the monster, not the mob boss. You. The man who reads Dante at midnight and cooks because he can't trust anyone else. The man who's terrified of caring about people because everyone he's ever cared about has been taken from him. She reached across the table, stopping just short of touching his hand. I see you, and I'm not afraid of what I see. Lorenzo looked at her hand so close to his. Then slowly he reached out and took it. His palm was warm, his grip careful, like he was holding something fragile. You should be, he said quietly. Afraid of me. Of this. Of what it could cost you. Maybe, but I'm not. They sat like that, hands clasped across the kitchen table while the night deepened around them. Outside, the world continued its violent turning. Inside, something new and fragile was being born. Neither of them spoke of it again that night, but when Elena finally returned to her room, she could still feel the warmth of his hand in hers. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that everything had changed. The call came 3 days later, shattering the fragile peace they'd built in the safe house. Lorenzo's phone buzzed during breakfast, and Elena watched his expression shift from relaxed to stone in the space of a heartbeat. When? He asked, his voice clipped. A pause. How bad? He listened for another moment, then ended the call without saying goodbye. When he looked at her, Elena saw something she'd never seen in his eyes before. Uncertainty. What happened? Your father collapsed this morning. He's in the hospital. Lorenzo was already moving, grabbing his jacket. We need to go. The drive back to Rome felt endless. Sophia drove while Lorenzo made call after call, his voice low and urgent as he reorganized security protocols, moved resources, prepared for whatever might come next. Elena sat in the back seat, her hands clenched in her lap, watching the city grow closer through the windshield. He's going to be okay, she said, not sure if she was trying to convince Lorenzo or herself. Lorenzo glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Elena, don't tell me to prepare for the worst. Not yet. He nodded, returning to his phone calls. But she'd seen the truth in his eyes. Her father was dying, and they both knew it. The only question was how much time remained. The hospital was a private facility on Rome's north side, the kind of place where discretion was more valuable than the medical equipment. Lorenzo had arranged for an entire floor to be cleared, security posted at every access point. As they walked through sterile hallways, Elena felt like she was moving through a nightmare. Her father looked small in the hospital bed. That was her first thought. Antonio Moretti had always been a large presence. Broad-shouldered, commanding, the kind of man who filled a room just by entering it. Now, hooked up to machines and monitors, he looked diminished, fragile. Papa. Elena took his hand, careful of the IV line. His skin felt papery, too thin. Antonio's eyes opened, focusing slowly. When he saw her, something like relief crossed his face. Bella, you came. Of course I came. She pulled a chair close to the bed, aware of Lorenzo standing in the doorway, giving them space. What happened? The cancer. It's moving faster than they expected. His voice was weak but steady. The doctors say weeks now. Maybe a month if I'm lucky. Elena felt tears burn her eyes but refused to let them fall. We'll get a second opinion. Better doctors. There are treatments. No. Antonio squeezed her hand. No more treatments. I'm tired, Elena. I've been fighting this for 2 years. It's time to stop. Don't say that. It's the truth. He looked past her to Lorenzo. You're taking care of her? Yes, sir. Good. Good. Antonio's gaze returned to Elena. I know you're angry with me, for the marriage, for not telling you about your mother. You have every right to be. Papa, let me finish. Please. He took a labored breath. When Vittoria died, I failed her. I was too afraid to seek justice, too concerned with keeping you safe to risk exposing the truth. I've lived with that cowardice for 15 years, but I won't fail you the same way. Lorenzo can protect you in ways I never could. He's a hard man, but he's honorable. He'll keep his word. Elena glanced back at Lorenzo, who met her eyes briefly before looking away. He has been. We're managing. Antonio almost smiled. That's a start. His expression grew more serious. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you years ago. What is it? The night of the fire. You were there, but you don't remember. The doctor said it was trauma, that your mind blocked it out. But Elena, you saw something important. The word sent ice down her spine. What did I see? I don't know. Your mother called me that night, said she'd found proof. Real proof, something that could bring down the entire Santoro operation. She told me she'd hidden it somewhere safe, somewhere only you would know to look. Antonio's grip on her hand tightened. Before she died, she hid you in that closet. But first, she must have told you something, given you some instruction. I've spent 15 years trying to figure out what, but I couldn't. The answer is locked in your memory. Elena felt the room tilt. You think I know where this evidence is? I think your mother made sure you would know when the time was right. She was brilliant, Elena. She wouldn't have died without ensuring her work survived. He coughed, the sound wet and painful. That's why the Santoros want you dead. Not just because you're Vittoria's daughter, but because somewhere in your mind is the key to their destruction. Lorenzo moved closer to the bed. Have you told anyone else about this theory? No, I've kept it to myself all these years. If the Santoros knew... Antonio trailed off, the implication clear. They'd stop at nothing to kill her. Lorenzo's voice was grim. Which means we need to find this evidence before they realize what she might know. How? Elena asked. I don't remember anything about that night, just waking up in the hospital. Memories can be recovered, Antonio said, with the right help. There are specialists, people who work with trauma patients. They might be able to unlock what your mother told you. Or we could be walking Elena straight into a trap, Lorenzo countered. If the Santoros have any idea we're looking for this evidence, they'll be watching for exactly this kind of move. What choice do we have? Let them hunt her forever? Antonio looked between them. This is the only way to end it. Find the proof Vittoria died to protect, expose the Santoros, let justice finally be served. Justice is a luxury, Lorenzo said flatly. Survival comes first. Sometimes they're the same thing. The two men stared at each other, and Elena saw the fundamental difference between them. Her father still believed in systems and consequences, in the power of truth. Lorenzo had learned long ago that power was the only truth that mattered. I'll think about it, Lorenzo said finally, but nothing happens without proper security measures. If Elena agrees to try to recover these memories, it'll be on my terms. Fair enough. Antonio settled back against his pillows, looking exhausted. Elena, whatever you decide, know that I'm proud of you. You're stronger than I ever was, braver than I deserved. Stop talking like you're dying. I am dying, Bella, but that's all right. I'll see your mother again soon. I have a lot to apologize for. Elena stayed with her father until he fell asleep, his breathing shallow but steady. When she finally emerged from the room, she found Lorenzo in the hallway, speaking quietly with Sofia and two men she didn't recognize. We need to move him, one of the men was saying. This facility is secure, but it's also predictable. The Santoros will know he's here. Where would you suggest? Lorenzo asked. The villa outside Florence. Medical staff on site, full security detail, isolated location. We can have him transported within hours. Lorenzo nodded. Do it, but quietly. I don't want anyone knowing where he's going. The men left to make arrangements. Sofia excused herself to coordinate with the security team, leaving Elena alone with Lorenzo in the sterile hallway. You're moving my father? She asked. For his safety. And yours. Lorenzo guided her toward a small waiting room. If what he said is true, if you really do have information locked in your memory, then keeping both of you alive becomes exponentially more complicated. You think he's right? That my mother told me something? I think Vittoria Moretti was smart enough to have a contingency plan. And I think you being in that house, surviving when you should have died, that wasn't an accident. He leaned against the wall, studying her. The question is whether trying to recover those memories is worth the risk. The risk of what? Of the Santoros finding out. Of them escalating before we're ready. Of you remembering something so terrible it breaks you. His voice was gentle but honest. Trauma has a way of protecting us from things we're not ready to handle, Elena. Sometimes there are good reasons memories stay buried. She thought about that. About the blank space in her mind where that night should be. About waking up in a hospital with no idea how she'd gotten there, her world reduced to ashes and absence. My mother died trying to expose the truth, Elena said quietly. She could have run. Could have ignored what she found and kept herself safe. But she chose to fight, even knowing what it might cost her. If there's a chance, any chance, that I can finish what she started, I have to try. Even if it destroys you? Even then. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. Then he pushed off the wall and stood in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. If we do this, he said, we do it carefully. Specialists vetted by my people, secure location, full security detail. You don't remember anything without me there. Understood? You don't have to protect me from myself. Yes, I do. Because you're brave enough to burn yourself alive if you think it'll serve some greater good. Someone needs to make sure you don't. His hand came up, almost touching her face before he caught himself and pulled back. Let me be that someone. The words, the gesture, the raw honesty in his voice, it all crashed over Elena like a wave. This man, this criminal who'd entered her life as a stranger and a contract, was looking at her like she mattered, like keeping her alive meant something beyond strategy. Okay, she whispered. We do it your way. Relief flickered across his features, there and gone in an instant. We'll start making arrangements, but first we get your father moved and settled, one crisis at a time. They left the hospital an hour later, after Antonio had been sedated for transport. The villa Lorenzo mentioned was a 3-hour drive, and they'd follow the medical convoy to ensure safe arrival. As they walked to the car, Elena's phone buzzed. The message was from a number she didn't recognize. Your father's time is running out, so is yours. Stop looking for what's already burned. She showed it to Lorenzo without a word. His jaw tightened as he read it. They're watching, he said quietly. They know we were at the hospital. How is that possible? You said this place was secure. Nowhere is truly secure. Not when your enemy has resources and patience. He forwarded the message to Sophia, then deleted it from Elena's phone. From now on, we assume everything is compromised. Every location, every conversation, every plan. We trust no one outside our immediate circle. That's a lonely way to live. It's the only way to stay alive. The drive to Florence was tense and silent. Elena watched the countryside roll past, trying not to think about the message, about her father dying in the medical transport ahead of them, about the memories locked somewhere in her skull that people were willing to kill for. Instead, she thought about her mother, about Vittoria Moretti, who'd worked as a bookkeeper and loved art and made the best tiramisu Elena had ever tasted, who'd sung while she cooked and read stories at bedtime and probably had no idea that choosing truth would cost her everything. Tell me about the specialist, Elena said suddenly. The one who can help recover memories. Lorenzo glanced at her. Dr. Alessandra Russo. She's a neuropsychologist, specializes in trauma recovery. I've used her before for witnesses who've seen things they couldn't consciously remember. She's discreet, professional, and very good at her job. You've used her before? For your business? Yes. And the people she helped remember things. What happened to them after? Lorenzo's silence was answer enough. Elena closed her eyes, understanding. The witnesses had remembered, provided their testimony or information, and then, what? Been killed? Disappeared? Paid off and relocated? I won't let that happen to you, Lorenzo said quietly, reading her thoughts. Whatever you remember, whatever we find, you're not disposable, Elena. Not to me. What am I to you? The question hung between them. Outside, the Tuscan landscape blurred past, golden in the late afternoon light. Lorenzo kept his eyes on the road. I don't know, he admitted finally. More than you should be. More than is safe for either of us. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. They reached the villa as the sun was setting, painting the old stone walls orange and gold. It was beautiful in the way old Italian estates always are. Cypress trees lining the drive, gardens gone slightly wild, architecture that had survived centuries of wars and plagues and revolutions. Antonio was already inside, settled in a ground-floor bedroom that had been converted into a medical suite. Monitors beeped softly, IV bags hung from stands, and a private nurse moved efficiently through her routines. It looked as sterile as the hospital, but somehow sadder, like watching someone slowly vanish. He's resting comfortably, the nurse reported. The transport went well. No complications. Elena spent the evening sitting with her father while Lorenzo handled security arrangements. Antonio woke briefly around 8, confused about where he was until Elena explained. He drifted off again quickly, his breathing labored even with the oxygen support. You should eat something, the nurse said gently. He'll likely sleep through the night now. The medication keeps him comfortable. Elena let herself be guided to the villa's main kitchen, where Sophia had arranged a simple dinner. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, her mind spinning with everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. Lorenzo found her there an hour later, staring at a plate of half-eaten pasta. The security sweep is complete, he said. The perimeter is locked down, cameras operational, and I've got teams rotating every 6 hours. We're as safe here as we can be anywhere. And Dr. Russo? Will arrive tomorrow afternoon. I've briefed her on the general situation, but not the specifics. The less anyone knows, the better. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Are you sure about this? We can still walk away. Find another solution. Like what? Live in hiding forever? Wait for the Santoros to eventually get lucky? Elena shook her head. No, I want to remember. I want to know what my mother thought was worth dying for. Even if it's terrible? Especially then. Lorenzo studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're more like Vittoria than you know. That same stubborn courage, that same refusal to look away. You never met her. No, but I've seen what she built. The evidence she collected, the risks she took. And I see her daughter, who'd rather face trauma than live with uncertainty. He reached across the table, and this time he did touch her hand. That kind of courage is rare, Elena. It's also dangerous. Everything about my life is dangerous now. True enough. His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, the gesture almost absent-minded. But I'll keep you safe through it. That's a promise. You can't promise that. You can't control everything. Watch me. There was steel in his voice, an absolute conviction that should have felt arrogant, but instead felt protective. Like he'd go to war with the world itself before letting anything happen to her. When had that shift happened? When had Lorenzo Vescari stopped being her captor and become her defender? When had she stopped seeing him as the enemy and started seeing him as something far more complicated? What happens after? Elena asked. After I remember. After we find whatever my mother hid. What then? Then we decide what to do with it. Use it to destroy the Santoros or use it as leverage to negotiate peace. Lorenzo's voice was pragmatic, strategic. It depends on what the evidence actually proves. My father wants justice. Your father is dying. He has the luxury of idealism. Lorenzo's expression hardened. I have to think about survival, yours and mine. If exposing the Santoros means all-out war, we need to be sure we can win before we pull that trigger. And if we can't win, then we find another way. There's always another way. Elena wasn't sure she believed that, but she was too tired to argue. The day had drained her, left her feeling hollow and fragile. She pulled her hand free from Lorenzo's and stood. I'm going to check on my father, then try to sleep. Elena. Lorenzo stood as well, something uncertain in his expression. You're not alone in this. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever you remember, I'll be there. You understand that? She did. And that understanding, that knowledge that she wouldn't have to face her demons alone, was the only thing holding her together. Thank you, she said quietly, then left before the tears she'd been holding back could finally fall. That night, in a guest room that smelled of lavender and old wood, Elena lay awake and tried to remember. She pushed at the blank space in her mind, searching for any fragment, any image or sound or sensation from that lost night. Nothing came. Just darkness and the faint echo of something that might have been her mother's voice, or might have been her imagination. Tomorrow, Dr. Russo would arrive. Tomorrow, she'd try to unlock whatever secrets her 8-year-old self had buried. Tomorrow, everything might change. Elena stared at the ceiling and waited for a dawn that felt impossibly far away. Dr. Alessandra Russo arrived precisely at 2 p.m, driving herself in a modest sedan that seemed at odds with the armed guards and security protocols. She was younger than Elena expected, maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and intelligent eyes that took in everything. Lorenzo met her at the villa's entrance, and Elena watched from a window as they spoke. There was a familiarity between them that suggested they'd worked together before, multiple times. Doctor. Russo gestured as she talked, animated and confident. Lorenzo listened with his characteristic intensity, then nodded and led her inside. Elena, he said when they entered the sitting room where she'd been waiting. This is Dr. Russo. Please call me Alessandra. The doctor's handshake was firm, professional. Lorenzo has explained the general situation. You've experienced a traumatic memory gap and would like to explore recovery techniques. Is that correct? Yes. Elena glanced at Lorenzo, who gave her an encouraging nod. I was 8 years old. There was a fire. I survived, but I don't remember anything about that night. Dissociative amnesia, Alessandra said, pulling a tablet from her bag. It's the mind's way of protecting itself from overwhelming trauma. The memories aren't necessarily gone. They're just locked away. With the right approach, we may be able to access them. Maybe? I won't lie to you. Memory recovery is unpredictable. Sometimes we can retrieve clear, detailed memories. Sometimes we only get fragments. And sometimes, despite our best efforts, the mind refuses to release what it's hidden. Alessandra's voice was kind, but honest. There's also the possibility that what you remember will be difficult to process. Are you prepared for that? Elena thought of her mother, of the blank space where that night should be, of the message threatening her to stop looking for what's already burned. I'm prepared, she said. They set up in the villa's library, a quiet room lined with books that probably hadn't been read in decades. Alessandra arranged 2 comfortable chairs facing each other, adjusted the lighting to be soft and warm, and asked Lorenzo to wait outside. Actually, Elena said quickly, I'd like him to stay, if that's all right. Alessandra looked between them, then nodded. Of course. Lorenzo, you can sit over there. Just remain quiet and still. Any distraction could disrupt the process. Lorenzo settled into a chair by the window, his presence solid and reassuring. Elena took her seat across from Alessandra, her heart pounding. We'll start with relaxation techniques, Alessandra explained. I'm going to guide you into a calm, focused state. Not hypnosis. You'll be fully conscious and in control at all times. Think of it as turning down the volume on everything except your own memories. Okay? Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Good. Now another. Alessandra's voice was soothing, steady. Elena let herself follow the instructions, feeling her muscles gradually relax, her breathing slow and deepen. The sounds of the villa faded, the distant voices of security guards, the tick of an old clock. Even Lorenzo's presence receded to a gentle awareness at the edge of her consciousness. I want you to think about your childhood home, Alessandra said softly. The house in Trastevere. Can you picture it? Yes. The image came easily. Yellow walls, terracotta tiles, a garden where her mother grew herbs. Good. Now I want you to walk through that house in your mind. Start at the front door. Tell me what you see. Elena described it slowly. The narrow entrance hall with family photos on the walls, her mother's coat hanging on a hook, the smell of basil and tomatoes from the kitchen. Keep walking. Where does that hallway lead? To the kitchen on the left, the living room on the right, stairs straight ahead going up to the bedrooms. Let's go upstairs. Take your time. Elena mentally climbed those stairs, her child-sized feet on worn wood. My room is the first door. My parents' room is at the end of the hall. There's a bathroom in between. What's in your room? A bed with a yellow blanket, stuffed animals on a shelf, a desk where I did homework, posters of horses on the walls. I loved horses. You're 8 years old now, Elena. It's nighttime. Are you in your room? The question sent a ripple through her calm. Elena's breath hitched. Yes, I'm in bed. I'm supposed to be asleep, but I'm not. Why aren't you asleep? There are voices. Downstairs. My mother is talking to someone. She sounds upset. Alessandra's voice remained steady, anchoring. What do you do? I get out of bed. I go to the top of the stairs. The memory was unfolding now, vivid and real. Elena could feel the cool wood beneath her bare feet, the darkness of the hallway. I can hear better now. My mother is arguing with a man. What are they saying? I don't know. I can't understand all the words, but Mama is angry. She says something about proof, about calling the police. Elena's hands grip the arms of her chair. The man's voice gets louder. He says she's making a mistake. Stay with the memory. What happens next? Mama sees me. She's at the bottom of the stairs and she looks up and sees me watching. Her face, Elena's voice cracked. She looks scared, so scared. She tells the man to wait. She's coming back. She just needs to put me to bed. Does she come upstairs? Yes. She runs up the stairs and takes my hand. We go back to my room, but we don't stop there. We keep going down the hall to her bedroom, to the closet. Tears were streaming down Elena's face now, but she kept her eyes closed, locked in the memory. She's pulling clothes aside, reaching up to the top shelf. There's a box. She takes it down. What kind of box? Metal, like a small safe. She opens it with a key from her necklace. Inside there are papers, files. She's looking through them so fast, her hands are shaking. What does she do with them? Elena's breath came faster. She finds what she's looking for. A folder. Red folder. She kneels down in front of me and puts her hands on my shoulders. She's crying. She says, the memory hit like a physical blow. Elena gasped, her eyes flying open. What does she say? Alessandra asked gently. You're safe, Elena. You're here. What does your mother tell you? She says, Elena's voice was barely a whisper. She says, remember the angels, baby. Remember where the angels sleep. If anything happens to me, you tell someone you trust. Remember the angels. Then she kisses my forehead and she puts me in the closet. She puts the folder in my hands and tells me to be brave and quiet. She tells me she loves me. The folder. The red folder. What happens to it? I don't know. I'm in the closet. I can hear voices again, shouting. Then there's a smell, smoke. It gets hard to breathe. Elena was shaking now, the trauma bleeding through 15 years of protective forgetting. I'm scared. I want Mama. I try to open the door, but she told me to stay quiet, to be brave. So I wait. I wait in the dark and the smoke until... She couldn't continue. The sobs took over, violent and wrenching. Immediately, Lorenzo was there, crossing the room in 3 strides and pulling her into his arms. Elena buried her face against his chest and wept for the mother who'd hidden her, who'd given her a mission an 8-year-old couldn't possibly understand, who'd died while she waited in a closet with a red folder and a cryptic message about angels. "You did beautifully," Alessandra said quietly. "Elena, you remembered. That's incredibly brave." "The folder," Lorenzo said over Elena's head. "Did the fire department find it? Was there any evidence recovered from the closet?" "I'll need to check the reports," Alessandra replied. "But if she was holding it when they found her, it should have been logged." Elena pulled back from Lorenzo, wiping her eyes. "I don't remember having it when I woke up in the hospital. I don't remember anything after the smoke." "You likely passed out from smoke inhalation," Alessandra explained. "The firefighters would have found you unconscious. If you were holding something, they would have taken it as evidence or personal effects." "So where is it now?" Lorenzo's voice was hard, strategic. 15 years later, where's that folder?" "My father," Elena said suddenly. "He would have collected my things from the hospital. If there was a folder, he would have it." Lorenzo was already pulling out his phone. "I'll have someone check his house in Rome. Carefully. If the Santoros are watching, we can't risk them knowing what we're looking for." "There's something else," Elena said, her mind racing. "My mother said, 'Remember where the angels sleep.' That has to mean something. Some kind of location." "Could it be a church?" Alessandra suggested. "Angels, religious imagery?" "No." Elena shook her head, certainty building. "My mother wasn't religious. She wouldn't hide evidence in a church. It has to be something else. Something only I would understand." "Think," Lorenzo said. "What did angels mean to you when you were 8? Did you have a favorite story, a favorite place?" Elena closed her eyes, sifting through childhood memories. Angels. Where did angels sleep? What would her mother have meant? And then it hit her. "The cemetery," she breathed. "Campo Verano. My grandmother is buried there. Her headstone has angels on it. 2 angels with their heads bowed like they're sleeping. My mother used to take me there on Sundays to bring flowers. We'd sit by the grave and have picnics." Lorenzo exchanged a look with Alessandra. "That's specific enough to be right, but if she hid something there 15 years ago..." "It might still be there," Elena said. "The cemetery doesn't change. Graves don't move. If she found a way to hide evidence near my grandmother's headstone, it could have stayed hidden all this time." "Or been discovered," Lorenzo countered, "or destroyed by weather, or a dozen other things that could have gone wrong in 15 years. But it's worth checking. It's the only real lead we have." Lorenzo ran a hand through his hair, thinking. "We'd need to go at night, minimal witnesses, small team, and we'd need to move fast. The Santoros will be watching the obvious locations related to your family." "Then we go tonight," Elena said, "before they figure out what we know." "Absolutely not. We need time to plan, to ensure..." "Lorenzo, my father is dying. Every day we wait is a day the Santoros could find this first, or a day my memories could fade again. We have to move now." He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The need to keep her safe, warring with the knowledge that she was right. "Tonight," he finally agreed. "But my rules, my team, and you do exactly what I say when I say it. Understood?" "Understood." Alessandra gathered her things. "I should go. Lorenzo, you know how to reach me if you need anything else." After she left, Elena and Lorenzo stood in the library, the weight of what came next pressing down on them. "I should check on my father," Elena said. "Tell him what I remembered." "Wait." Lorenzo caught her arm. "Before you do, are you sure you want to do this? Go to the cemetery tonight, because once we start down this path, there's no going back. The Santoros will know we're actively searching. It'll force their hand." "I know. And you're ready for that? For whatever comes next?" Elena thought about her mother's face in that recovered memory. The fear, the determination, the love. Vittoria Moretti had faced death knowing her daughter would carry forward what she'd started. How could Elena do anything less? "I'm ready," she said. "Let's finish what my mother began." Lorenzo's expression shifted, something like pride mixing with concern. "Then we move at midnight. Get some rest while you can. This is going to be a long night." But rest was impossible. Elena spent the evening with her father, telling him what she'd remembered, watching hope flare in his failing eyes. "The angels," Antonio murmured. "Of course, your grandmother's grave. Vittoria was clever." "Did you know?" Elena asked. "Did you suspect she'd hidden evidence there?" "I suspected she'd hidden it somewhere meaningful, somewhere only you could find. But I never thought of the cemetery." He gripped her hand weakly. "Be careful tonight, Bella. If you're right, if the evidence is still there..." The Santoros will do anything to keep it buried. Lorenzo will protect me. I know. That's why I chose him for you. Antonio's eyes drifted closed. He's a hard man, but he cares about you. I see it in how he looks at you, how he positions himself between you and danger. Elena thought about Lorenzo's hand on hers, about the way he'd crossed the room when she broke down, about the promise in his voice when he said he'd keep her safe. Yes, she said softly. I think he does. At 11:30, Lorenzo came to get her. He changed into dark clothes, practical and unremarkable. He handed her a similar outfit. Put this on. And this. He produced a small handgun. Do you know how to use it? No? Then don't. But keep it on you anyway. If something goes wrong, if we get separated, you run. Don't try to be a hero. Elena took the gun, feeling its weight in her palm. I thought you were keeping me safe. I am. This is insurance. He showed her how to release the safety, how to hold it properly. Aim center mass, pull the trigger, simple. Nothing about this is simple. No, Lorenzo agreed, but we're doing it anyway. They left the villa at midnight, taking a nondescript car in a route that doubled back on itself 3 times to ensure they weren't followed. Sofia drove while Lorenzo sat in back with Elena, his attention split between his phone and the darkened streets sliding past. Campo Verano was silent and shadowed when they arrived, the cemetery gates locked for the night. Lorenzo's team had already disabled the security cameras and cut the lock, making their entry look like a random break-in rather than a targeted search. Inside, the cemetery sprawled in all directions, thousands of graves marked by marble and stone and faded photographs. Elena led them through the maze of monuments, following half-remembered paths to her grandmother's resting place. She found it in the cemetery's oldest section, where elaborate headstones gave way to simpler markers. Just as she remembered, 2 angels flanked her grandmother's name, their heads bowed, their wings curved protectively. Where the angels sleep, Elena whispered. Lorenzo's team spread out, providing security while Elena and Lorenzo examined the grave. The headstone was solid marble, impossible to move. The ground around it looked undisturbed, no obvious hiding places. Maybe behind it, Elena suggested. They searched the area carefully, looking for any hollow space, any indication something had been buried or hidden. Minutes ticked past, and Elena felt desperation building. It has to be here, she said. My mother wouldn't have told me to remember if there was nothing to find. Unless someone already found it, Lorenzo said grimly. 15 years is a long time. Elena refused to accept that. She knelt by the headstone, running her hands over the carved angels, feeling for any irregularity. Her fingers found a small gap where one angel's wing met the stone. Lorenzo, look at this. He knelt beside her, pulling out a flashlight. In its beam, they could see that the angel's wing wasn't fully attached. It was a separate piece, carefully fitted but not permanently fixed. Working carefully, Lorenzo pried the wing free. Behind it was a hollow space in the stone, just large enough for a small object. And inside that space, wrapped in waterproof plastic and remarkably well preserved, was a red folder. Elena's hands shook as she pulled it free. After 15 years, after all the death and fear and running, here it was, her mother's legacy. The truth Vittoria had died to protect. Open it, Lorenzo said quietly. Elena unwrapped the plastic and opened the folder. Inside were photographs, bank statements, ledgers covered in her mother's handwriting, names and dates and amounts that told a story of systematic corruption and violence. And at the very back, a list. 20 names with corresponding crimes, murder, extortion, trafficking, evidence that could destroy not just the Santoro family, but half the criminal enterprises in Rome. This is enough to put them all away, Elena breathed. All of them. Lorenzo's expression was unreadable as he photographed each page with his phone. This is enough to start a war. A sound from the darkness made them both freeze. Footsteps. Multiple people, moving through the cemetery with purpose. We need to go, Lorenzo said urgently. Now! But it was too late. Lights blazed to life around them, temporarily blinding. When Elena's eyes adjusted, she saw they were surrounded. At least a dozen men, all armed, all pointed weapons at them. And at the center of them stood an older man with cold eyes and a cruel smile. Lorenzo Vescari, he said. How kind of you to lead me right to what I've been searching for all these years. Elena's blood turned to ice. She didn't need to be told who this was. Domenico Santoro had found them, and he wanted his secrets back. Lorenzo moved before Elena could even process what was happening. He shoved her behind the headstone and pulled his weapon in one fluid motion, his body a shield between her and Domenico's men. You're outnumbered, Vescari, Domenico said, his voice carrying the casual confidence of a man who'd already won. Outgunned, and trapped in a cemetery at midnight, Poetic, really. Put down the weapon and we can discuss this like civilized people. Civilized. Lorenzo's laugh was cold. That's rich coming from a man who burns women alive. Vittoria Moretti made her choices, just as you're making yours now. Domenico took a step closer, his men moving with him in perfect coordination. The folder. Give it to me, and I'll let you both walk away. You're lying. Perhaps. But what choice do you have? Die here with your wife, or take the chance I'm feeling merciful tonight? Domenico's smile widened. Though I must say, Lorenzo, marrying Vittoria's daughter was a bold move. I didn't think you had it in you to be so sentimental. Elena clutched the folder to her chest, her heart hammering. She could feel Lorenzo's tension, see the calculations happening behind his eyes. They were trapped. Sophia and the security team were somewhere in the cemetery, but clearly not close enough to help. And even if Lorenzo's men arrived, a firefight here would get them both killed. The folder is already uploaded, Lorenzo said, his voice steady despite the impossible odds. Kill us, and it goes straight to every police agency in Italy. You'll be arrested before dawn. Bluffing doesn't suit you. You haven't had time. Domenico gestured, and two of his men moved closer, weapons trained on Lorenzo's head. Last chance. The folder, or I start with her. Let's see if you're willing to watch another woman burn for your pride. Elena saw Lorenzo's hand tighten on his gun, saw the muscle in his jaw jump. He was weighing it, she realized. Measuring the odds, calculating how many of Domenico's men he could take down before they killed him. Before they killed her. She made the decision for him. Wait. Elena stepped out from behind the headstone, ignoring Lorenzo's sharp intake of breath. Don't shoot. I'll give you the folder. Elena, no. It's just paper, Lorenzo. It's not worth dying for. She looked at Domenico, forcing her voice to stay calm. You let us go, both of us, and I'll hand it over. You have my word. Domenico studied her with interest. Vittoria's daughter. You have her eyes, you know. She looked at me the same way the night she died. Defiant even when she should have been begging. He tilted his head. But you're smarter than she was. You understand that some fights can't be won. I understand that you're a murderer who's been running from justice for 15 years. Elena took another step forward, putting more distance between herself and Lorenzo. I also understand that this evidence is the only leverage I have. So here's my offer. Let Lorenzo leave, right now. When he's safe, I'll give you the folder. And yourself? You'd stay behind as insurance? If that's what it takes. No. Lorenzo's voice was sharp with fury. Elena, get back behind the stone, now. She ignored him, keeping her eyes on Domenico. Do we have a deal? The old man considered her for a long moment. Then he nodded to his men. Lower your weapons. Let Viscari leave. I'm not leaving without her, Lorenzo said flatly. Then you're both dying here, your choice. Domenico's patience was clearly wearing thin. The girl is being pragmatic, Lorenzo. You should take notes. She's my wife. I don't abandon. She's a shield you married for strategic purposes. Don't pretend this is love. Domenico's smile turned cruel. Though perhaps it's become that, hasn't it? How inconvenient for you both. Elena turned to look at Lorenzo, really look at him. His face was a mask of controlled rage, but his eyes were desperate, afraid. Not for himself, she realized. For her. Go, she said quietly. Please, Lorenzo, just go. I can't. You have to. If we both die here, the Santoros win everything, but if you live, you can still fight them. You can finish this. She moved closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. You have the photographs on your phone. The evidence isn't lost. Let me do this. They'll kill you the second I'm gone. Maybe. Or maybe Domenico is just arrogant enough to think he's won, and he'll let me live. She managed a small smile. I'm betting on arrogant. Lorenzo's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, his grip almost painful. I won't lose you. Do you understand me? I won't. The rawness in his voice broke something open in her chest. This man, this criminal who'd entered her life as a stranger in a contract, was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. You won't lose me, Elena promised, with more confidence than she felt. I'm harder to kill than I look. My mother's daughter, remember? Elena. Touching as this is, Domenico interrupted, I'm losing patience. Viscari, you have 10 seconds to leave or I start shooting. 10, 9, 8. Lorenzo pulled Elena close, so fast she barely had time to gasp. His lips crashed against hers in a kiss that was desperate and fierce, and full of everything they'd been dancing around for weeks. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, but Elena felt it burn through her like lightning. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. Stay alive. Whatever it takes, you stay alive until I come for you. 7, 6, 5. Lorenzo released her and stepped back, his weapon still trained on Domenico. If she's harmed in any way, I'll burn your entire family to the ground. Every business, every asset, every person who shares your blood. That's not a threat. It's a promise. 4, 3, I'm going. Lorenzo looked at Elena one last time, and she saw the agony in his face. Then he turned and disappeared into the darkness of the cemetery, moving with the silence of a predator. Domenico's men started to follow, but he held up a hand. Let him go. We have what we came for. Elena's heart was still racing from the kiss, from the fear, from everything. She watched the shadows where Lorenzo had vanished, praying she'd made the right choice, praying she'd see him again. The folder, Domenico said, extending his hand. Elena looked down at it, at her mother's careful handwriting, at 15 years of evidence. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She ran. Not away from Domenico's men, but toward the nearest mausoleum, a stone structure with a heavy door. She hit it at full speed, yanking it open and diving inside before anyone could react. The door slammed shut behind her, and she threw the internal bolt just as bodies crashed against the outside. Get that door open! Domenico's voice was fury now, all pretense of civility gone. Elena backed away from the door, pulling out the gun Lorenzo had given her. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The mausoleum was small, maybe 10 feet by 10, filled with stone coffins and the smell of decay. There were no other exits, no windows. She'd trapped herself. But she'd bought time. The door shuddered as Domenico's men threw their weight against it. Wood began to splinter. Elena raised the gun, remembering Lorenzo's instructions. Aim center mass. Pull the trigger. The door gave way with a crash and 2 men rushed in. Elena pulled the trigger. The recoil nearly knocked her down, but she saw one of the men stumble. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, her ears ringing. She fired again and again, not aiming now, just trying to keep them back. Click. Empty. More men poured through the door. Elena threw the useless gun at them and grabbed the folder, holding it over one of the stone coffins. Stop, she shouted. I'll destroy it. I swear I will. They froze. Through the doorway, Elena could see Domenico approaching, his face twisted with rage. You stupid girl, did you really think? The explosion cut him off. The ground shook, the mausoleum's walls trembling. Outside, screams erupted, followed by rapid gunfire. Elena stumbled, catching herself against a coffin. Lorenzo hadn't left. Of course he hadn't left. More explosions followed, systematic and devastating. Domenico's men scattered, some rushing out of the mausoleum, others taking cover. In the chaos, Elena saw her chance. She ran, past the men who were too confused to stop her, out into the cemetery where fires blazed from destroyed vehicles. Through smoke and darkness and the sound of warfare, looking desperately for Lorenzo. A hand grabbed her arm, and she screamed, twisting away. It's me! Sophia appeared through the smoke, her face streaked with soot. Come on! They ran together through the cemetery, dodging between headstones as bullets whined overhead. Sophia led her to a section of the wall where a rope ladder hung from the top. Climb! Now! Elena grabbed the rope, the folder still clutched in one hand, and hauled herself up. Her arms burned, her lungs screamed, but she climbed. At the top, hands reached down to pull her over. Lorenzo's hands. He pulled her into his arms so hard she couldn't breathe, his face buried in her hair. You brilliant, insane woman. When I said stay alive, I didn't mean start a gunfight. You came back. Of course I came back. Did you really think I'd leave you? He pulled back just enough to look at her face, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? No, Lorenzo, I still have the folder. I don't care about the folder. I care about you. His hands framed her face, his eyes intense. Don't ever do that again. Don't ever offer yourself up like that. I was trying to save you. And I was trying to save you. We're quite the pair. He kissed her again, softer this time, but no less desperate. Come on. We need to move before Domenico regroups. They climbed down the outside of the cemetery wall to where 3 cars waited, engines running. Sophia was already there, along with a dozen of Lorenzo's men. The operation had been planned in the minutes after Lorenzo left, a coordinated strike designed to extract Elena and destroy Domenico's forces. Casualties? Lorenzo asked as they drove away, the cemetery burning behind them. 3 of theirs confirmed dead, 5 wounded, the rest scattered. Sophia glanced back at Elena. That was either very brave or very stupid, Signora, locking yourself in a mausoleum. Stupid, Lorenzo and Elena said at the same time. Despite everything, Elena almost laughed. The adrenaline was crashing now, leaving her shaky and exhausted. She leaned against Lorenzo, feeling his arm come around her shoulders. We need to move your father, he said quietly. Domenico knows about the villa now. He'll strike there next. Where can we take him? He's too sick to travel far. I have a place. Remote, defensible. He'll be safe there while we figure out our next move. Lorenzo looked down at the folder still clutched in her hands. And we need to decide what to do with that. Elena opened it again, looking at the evidence her mother had died to collect. Names, dates, crimes. Proof of murders and corruption spanning decades. In her hands was the power to destroy the Santoro family completely. She thought about her mother's face in that recovered memory, the fear and determination, the final words, "Remember the angels." Vittoria hadn't just wanted this evidence found. She'd wanted it used. She'd wanted justice. "We release it," Elena said. "All of it. To the police, to the media, everywhere we can. We expose everything." "That will start a war," Lorenzo warned. "Not just with the Santoros. Half the families in Italy are implicated in these documents. They'll all come for us." "I know. But it's what my mother died for. What she wanted." Elena looked at him. "I can't let that mean nothing." Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. "All right. We'll release it. But we do it strategically. Multiple sources simultaneously, impossible to suppress. And we prepare for the backlash." "How do we prepare for a war?" "Very carefully." They drove through the night, switching vehicles twice, taking routes that doubled back and wound through areas where surveillance was impossible. By dawn, they reached a compound in the Apennine Mountains, a fortified estate that looked more like a military installation than a home. Antonio was already there, having been moved under heavy guard while Elena was at the cemetery. He looked worse than he had the day before, his skin gray, his breathing labored even with oxygen support. But when he saw the red folder, tears filled his eyes. "You found it, Vittoria's evidence." He reached for it with shaking hands. "Let me see." Elena sat beside his bed and showed him each page, watching his expression shift between grief and pride. "She was so brave," he murmured, "so impossibly brave." "She wanted this released, didn't she?" Elena asked. "She wanted the truth exposed, no matter the cost." "Yes, but she also wanted you safe. She'd want you to survive this, Elena, not sacrifice yourself for revenge." "It's not revenge, it's justice." Antonio looked at Lorenzo, who stood in the doorway. "You'll protect her? When this goes public, when every criminal in Italy wants her dead?" "With my life," Lorenzo said simply. "Then do it. Release everything. Let the world see what these men really are." Antonio settled back against his pillows, exhausted from even this small conversation. "I'll die knowing Vittoria's sacrifice meant something. That's enough." Over the next 48 hours, Lorenzo orchestrated the evidence release with military precision. Copies went to journalists at 3 major newspapers. Digital files went to police agencies and prosecutors. Physical evidence was secured in multiple locations, impossible to destroy all at once. And then they waited for the explosion. It came at dawn on the 3rd day. Headlines screamed across every major outlet, decades of corruption exposed. Mafia families' secrets revealed. Evidence links organized crime to government officials. Elena watched the news coverage from the compound's secure room, seeing her mother's name mentioned again and again. Vittoria Moretti, the brave bookkeeper who'd gathered this evidence, who died trying to expose the truth. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Within hours, arrest warrants were issued for 24 people, including Domenico Santoro. His assets were frozen, his properties raided. The empire he'd built over decades began to crumble. But he wasn't the only one affected. Other families named in the document struck back hard. 2 journalists who'd published the story were attacked. A prosecutor's car was bombed, and a bounty was placed on Elena's head, 5 million euros for her delivery to any of the affected families. "I'm the most expensive target in Italy," Elena said, trying to make light of it. Lorenzo didn't smile. "This is just the beginning. They'll come with everything they have." He was right. Over the following days, the compound was probed repeatedly. Drones appeared overhead, shot down by Lorenzo's security team. A delivery truck tried to ram the gates. Suspicious vehicles were spotted on the mountain roads leading to the estate. Through it all, Lorenzo never left Elena's side. He coordinated defenses, managed his crumbling business empire. Half his associates had cut ties to avoid the fallout, and prepared for what he knew was coming. "They'll attack in force soon," he told her one night as they reviewed security footage. "Domenico's desperate. He knows if he goes to prison, he'll never get out. He has nothing to lose." "Then why are we waiting here? Why not run?" "Because running is just delayed dying. Better to face it on ground we control, with defenses we trust." Lorenzo looked at her, his expression tired. "I'm sorry I brought you into this world, Elena. You deserved better. You didn't bring me into it. I was born into it the day my mother found those files." She took his hand. But you've given me something I didn't have before. What's that? A partner. Someone who fights beside me instead of making decisions for me. She squeezed his fingers. Whatever happens, we face it together. That matters. Lorenzo pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I love you. I should have said it before, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Elena. The words hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and absolutely true. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too. I think I have for a while now. I was just too stubborn to admit it. They kissed, slow and deep, like they had all the time in the world, like they weren't surrounded by enemies and waiting for an attack they might not survive. When they finally pulled apart, Lorenzo's expression had shifted. Determined now, resolved. I need to tell you something, he said. About what I'm planning to do. What do you mean? The evidence we released. It destroyed the Santoros, but it also exposed parts of my own operations. I'm implicated in several of those documents. Not the worst crimes, but enough that prosecutors will come for me eventually. He took a breath. I'm going to turn myself in, confess to everything, give testimony against the families named in your mother's evidence. Elena stared at him. That's suicide. You'll be killed in prison within days. Maybe, but it's the right thing to do. Your mother died seeking justice. I can't honor that by continuing to be part of the corruption she fought against. His voice was steady, certain. I've done terrible things, Elena. Things I can't take back, but I can stop doing them. I can choose to be better than what this life made me. And abandon me? Leave me to face this alone? You won't be alone. I'll make arrangements. Money in accounts they can't trace, properties in your name, security teams loyal to you. You'll be protected. I don't want protection. I want you. Elena felt panic rising in her chest. Lorenzo, don't do this. Don't throw your life away. I'm not throwing it away. I'm finally using it for something that matters. He cupped her face in his hands. I want to be worthy of you, Elena, of your courage and your principles. I can't do that while I'm still running an empire built on violence. You're already worthy. You don't have to destroy yourself to prove that. Yes, I do. For me, if not for you. He kissed her forehead gently. I've made my decision, but I need you to understand why. Elena understood. She hated it, but she understood. Lorenzo had spent his life surviving, becoming the monster everyone expected. Now he was choosing to be something else, something better, even if it killed him. Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the compound. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Lorenzo's phone erupted with alerts. They're here, he said grimly, checking the security feeds. Multiple vehicles, armed assault team. This is it. They ran to the compound's command center, where Sofia and Lorenzo's security chief were already coordinating defenses. On the monitors, Elena could see at least 20 vehicles approaching on the mountain roads, headlights in the pre-dawn darkness, moving with purpose. How many men? Lorenzo asked. 50, maybe more. They're not hiding anymore. This is a full assault. Sofia looked at Elena. Signora, we need to get you to the safe room. No, I'm staying here. Elena, I said no. I'm not hiding while people die defending me. She looked at Lorenzo. Give me a weapon. Teach me how to help. For a moment she thought he'd argue. Then he nodded, respect in his eyes. Sofia, get her a rifle and body armor. Elena, you stay in the command center. You only shoot if they breach this room. Understood? Understood. The next 20 minutes were a blur of preparation. Lorenzo's men took positions throughout the compound, turning it into a fortress. Barriers went up. Weapons were distributed. And then they waited as the approaching vehicles grew closer. Lorenzo stood at the window, watching the enemy arrive. Elena moved beside him, the rifle heavy in her hands. I meant what I said, she told him, about facing this together. I know. He turned to her, and in his eyes she saw everything they might have had. A future. A life. All the moments they'd never get to share. Whatever happens, Elena, no regrets. These past weeks with you have been worth everything that comes next. Don't talk like we've already lost. I'm not. I'm just making sure you know. The first shots rang out as Domenico's forces reached the compound gates. Glass shattered, men shouted, and the war they'd been expecting finally began. Elena gripped her rifle and prepared to fight for the future she'd found in the arms of a man who'd started as her captor and become her salvation. The battle raged through the morning. Domenico's forces were better armed than expected, better trained. They breached the outer defenses within an hour, pushing through the compound's courtyard despite heavy resistance. Lorenzo fought like a man possessed, coordinating defenses while simultaneously taking up a rifle when needed. Elena watched him move through the chaos with deadly precision and understood finally what it meant to survive in his world. Not cruelty, but competence. The ability to make impossible choices and live with them. By noon, they'd lost the outer buildings. Lorenzo pulled his remaining forces back to the main house, creating a final defensive line. They had ammunition and position, but Domenico had numbers. "We can't hold much longer," Sofia reported, her shoulder bleeding from a grazing wound. "They'll overwhelm us by nightfall." "Then we negotiate," Lorenzo said. "With what?" "They want us dead. They want Elena dead. They want the evidence destroyed." Lorenzo looked at her, and Elena saw the decision crystallizing in his eyes. "I'll offer them a trade." "No," Elena said immediately. "Whatever you're thinking. Me, for you. My life in exchange for your safety." Lorenzo's voice was calm, final. "Domenico wants revenge. He wants to destroy the Viscari family as thoroughly as we destroyed his. I'll give him that. I'll confess publicly to every crime in those documents, take full responsibility, and turn myself over to him. In exchange, he lets you live." "He'll never agree to that?" "He will. Because I'll make the confession before I surrender. Every media outlet, every prosecutor. I'll burn my entire empire to the ground, make sure there's nothing left for him to claim. The only satisfaction he'll get is my death." Lorenzo moved closer, taking her hands. "And you'll be free. The threat dies with me." "I won't let you do this." "You don't have a choice. I'm the one Domenico really wants. You're just collateral damage." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I need you to live, Elena. I need to know that something good came from all of this, that Vittoria's daughter survived, that her fight mattered." Elena was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "There has to be another way." "There isn't. We both know it." Lorenzo pulled back, looking at her face like he was memorizing it. "I love you. That's the truest thing I've ever said. And because I love you, I'm choosing this." Before she could stop him, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Elena heard him speaking to Domenico, laying out the terms. Her in exchange for his full confession, her safety guaranteed or the deal was void. She heard Domenico's laughter through the phone, heard him agree. "No," Elena said, grabbing for the phone. "Lorenzo, no." He ended the call and held her as she broke down. "It's done. In 1 hour, I walk out and surrender. You stay here with Sofia. She'll get you somewhere safe, somewhere you can start over." "I don't want to start over. I want you." "I know, but sometimes we don't get what we want. We get what we need to survive." Lorenzo kissed her one last time, pouring everything into it. "Be brave, like your mother. Live the life she wanted for you." The hour passed too quickly and far too slowly. Elena spent it trying to find alternatives, to think of some plan that would save them both. But Lorenzo was right. There was no other way. When the time came, he dressed in a clean suit, looking every inch the powerful man he'd been when they first met. But his eyes were different now. Softer. Human. "Take care of her father," he told Sofia. "Make sure Antonio dies comfortable, with his daughter beside him." "I will." "And Elena," Lorenzo turned to her. "Don't watch. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm watching. If you're brave enough to do this, I'm brave enough to witness it." Elena's voice was steel despite the tears. "I won't look away." Lorenzo nodded, understanding. Then he walked out of the command center, down through the battered compound, toward the front gates where Domenico waited. Elena watched on the monitors, seeing him move through the smoke and debris. Seeing Domenico's men surround him, weapons trained. Seeing him kneel as ordered, his hands behind his head. Domenico approached, said something Elena couldn't hear. Lorenzo responded, his voice carrying even through the chaos. "The confession is already sent. Every news outlet in Italy. Kill her, and you gain nothing but more charges." "I could kill you both." "You could, but then you're no better than the monster in those documents. At least this way you get your revenge with honor." Domenico considered for a long moment. Then he nodded to his men. They raised their weapons. Elena screamed, but no sound came out. She watched, helpless, as the man she loved prepared to die for her. But the shots never came. Instead, sirens filled the air, dozens of them, approaching from every direction. Police vehicles poured up the mountain roads surrounding the compound. Helicopters appeared overhead, spotlights blazing. The confession Lorenzo had sent. It hadn't just gone to media outlets. It had gone to every prosecutor, every police agency, every authority that could respond, and they'd responded with overwhelming force. Domenico's men scattered, but there was nowhere to run. Within minutes, they were surrounded, disarmed, arrested. And Domenico himself was on his knees, handcuffs being snapped around his wrists as charges were read. Lorenzo stood slowly, looking stunned. Police officers moved toward him too, but carefully, respectfully. "Lorenzo Viscari, you're under arrest," one said. But you're also under protection. The confession you sent, the prosecutor wants to make a deal. Full testimony against the families in exchange for reduced charges. Witness protection. Elena ran. Out of the command center, through the compound, past the police and the arrested men in the chaos. She ran to Lorenzo and threw her arms around him, not caring who saw. He held her just as tightly, his face buried in her hair. You're safe. Thank God you're safe. You're alive. You're actually alive. For now, Elena, I have to go with them. I have to testify, make this official. I know, I'll wait. However long it takes, I'll wait. Lorenzo pulled back, looking at her with wonder. Why? I'm going to prison, Elena. Even with a deal, I'll serve years. Then I'll be there when you get out. We'll start over, build something new. She cupped his face in her hands. You chose truth over power. You chose me over survival. That's the man I love. That's the man worth waiting for. Around them, police worked to secure the scene. Domenico was being led away in chains, screaming threats that would only add to his charges. Sophia appeared beside Elena, bloody but alive. Your father wants to see you, she said quietly, while there's still time. The reality of it crashed over Elena. In the chaos of the battle, in the terror of nearly losing Lorenzo, she'd almost forgotten. Her father was dying. Go, Lorenzo urged. I'll be here when you're done. They're not taking me anywhere yet. Elena ran back to the main house, to the medical suite where Antonio lay. He looked worse than before, if that was possible. But he was smiling. You won. Both of you. His voice was barely a whisper. Vittoria would be so proud. Papa, don't. Don't say goodbye yet. It's time, Bella. I'm ready. He reached for her hand. You have a good man. Different from what I expected, but good. He loves you enough to die for you. That's rare. He loves me enough to live for me. That's rarer. Elena held his hand, feeling it grow weaker. I love you, Papa. Thank you for protecting me all these years. Thank your mother. She's the brave one. I just tried to finish what she started. Antonio's eyes were closing. Tell her. Tell her I'm sorry it took so long. But we won. Justice won. He took one more breath. Then he was gone. Elena sat with him as the sun rose higher, as police worked through the compound, as the world slowly returned to something resembling order. She sat with him and grieved for the father who'd made impossible choices to keep her alive, for the mother who'd died seeking truth, for all the years lost to fear and running. When Lorenzo was finally allowed to come to her, he simply held her while she cried. No words, no promises. Just his presence, solid and real and alive. Later, they would deal with the aftermath. The trials, the testimony, the restructuring of everything. But for now, in the quiet after the storm, they had each other. And sometimes, that was enough. They buried Antonio Moretti 3 days later in a quiet ceremony at Campo Verano, beside the grandmother whose headstone had hidden the truth for 15 years. Elena stood between the two angel statues while rain fell in sheets, washing the smoke and blood from the past weeks into the earth. Lorenzo stood beside her in handcuffs, flanked by 2 police officers who'd agreed to let him attend under heavy guard. The prosecutor had been surprisingly accommodating. Lorenzo's confession and cooperation had handed them the biggest organized crime case in Italian history. Dozens of arrests had followed in the wake of Vittoria's evidence, and more were coming daily. In exchange for Lorenzo's continued testimony, they'd agreed to reduce charges and the possibility of witness protection afterward. The possibility, not the guarantee. How long? Elena had asked the lead prosecutor, a woman named Giulia Rossetti, who had sharp eyes and no patience for sentiment. Depends on how many trials we need him for. Could be months. Could be years. Rossetti had looked at her with something like sympathy. He committed serious crimes, Signora Viscari. Even with cooperation, he'll serve time. You should prepare yourself for that. Elena was trying, but watching Lorenzo stand in the rain with his hands bound, watching him forced to mourn from a distance rather than hold her, made preparation feel impossible. The priest finished his words. Elena placed white roses on her father's casket, her hand lingering on the polished wood. We did it, Papa, she whispered, just like you wanted. Justice won. The small gathering dispersed quickly in the rain. Sophia was there, her arm in a sling, but otherwise recovered. A few of Antonio's old friends, people who'd known him before everything fell apart. And Lorenzo's guards, stone-faced and professional. As the others left, Lorenzo's guard stepped back slightly, giving them a moment of privacy. Lorenzo moved closer to Elena, close enough that she could feel his warmth despite the rain soaking through both their clothes. I'm sorry I can't hold you, he said quietly. I'm sorry I can't be what you need right now. You're here. That's enough. Elena looked up at him, rain mixing with tears on her face. How long until they take you? Tonight, They're transferring me to a secure facility in Milan. High-profile witnesses get special protection. His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his jaw. The trials start in 2 weeks. Domenico's is first. I want to be there. To testify. Elena, no, it's too dangerous. These families, they're wounded, not destroyed. They'll be looking for revenge. I don't care. My mother's evidence started this. I need to see it through. She reached up, almost touching his face before remembering the guards watching. Besides, you'll be there. I want to see you, even if it's in a courtroom. Lorenzo's expression softened. You're sure about this? About waiting for me? About tangling your life with mine when I can't even promise you a future? I'm sure about you. The rest we'll figure out as we go. Elena managed a small smile. You taught me that. One crisis at a time, remember? I taught you a lot of terrible things. You taught me to be strong, to fight for what matters, to see the difference between surviving and living. She took a breath. And you taught me that love is choosing someone even when it's dangerous, especially when it's dangerous. Signor Vescari, one of the guards said quietly. We need to go. Lorenzo nodded, but his eyes never left Elena's face. I love you. Whatever happens in the trials, whatever comes next, that's the one thing that won't change. I love you too. Come back to me, Lorenzo. However long it takes. I will. I promise. They led him away then, back to the armored vehicle waiting beyond the cemetery gates. Elena watched until he disappeared from sight, until there was nothing left but rain and graves and the weight of everything still to come. Sophia appeared at her elbow, holding an umbrella that did little against the downpour. The car is waiting, Signora. We should go. Where? Elena looked around at the cemetery, at her parents' graves, at the city stretching beyond the walls. Where do I even go now? Wherever you want. You're free, Elena. For the first time in your life, you're actually free. The words should have felt liberating. Instead, they felt terrifying. Elena had spent weeks running, fighting, surviving. Now there was nothing left to run from, just the future, vast and uncertain, stretching out before her. I want to go home, she said finally. To my apartment. The one I had before all this started. Sophia hesitated. That might not be safe. Some of the families... I know, but I'm tired of hiding, tired of living in fortresses and safe houses. Elena turned to face her. My mother didn't die so I could spend my life afraid. She died so I could be free. I'm choosing to act like it. Sophia studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but you're taking security with you, non-negotiable. The apartment looked exactly as Elena had left it 2 months ago. Books stacked on the coffee table, dishes in the sink, a half-finished painting on the easel by the window. It felt like stepping into someone else's life, the life of a woman who'd worried about thesis deadlines and museum job applications, who'd had no idea her world was about to explode. That woman felt like a stranger now. Elena moved through the rooms, touching familiar objects that no longer held meaning. The diploma on the wall from her university, the photographs of friends she hadn't spoken to in weeks. The normalcy of it all felt surreal after everything she'd been through. Sophia's security team did a sweep, checking for bugs or threats, then posted guards at the building's entrance and in the hallway. Elena was alone in her apartment for the first time since the wedding, and the silence was deafening. She stood at the window, looking out at Rome in the fading daylight. The city continued its ancient rhythms, indifferent to the chaos in her life. People walked dogs and bought groceries and lived ordinary days. Elena had forgotten what ordinary felt like. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then recognized the area code. Milan. Hello? Elena, it's me. Lorenzo's voice slightly distorted by what was probably a secured line. They let me make one call. I wanted to make sure you got home safely. Relief flooded through her at the sound of his voice. I'm here. In my old apartment. It's strange being back. I can imagine. Is security in place? Yes. Sophia made sure of it. Elena sank onto the couch. How are you? Where are they keeping you? A facility designed for high-value witnesses. Comfortable enough, considering. Lots of concrete and cameras. He paused. I miss you already. Is that pathetic? If it is, then I'm pathetic too. I keep looking for you, expecting you to walk through the door. She closed her eyes. Tell me about the trials. What should I expect? Chaos, media everywhere. The families will try to discredit the evidence, discredit me, discredit you if you testify. They'll dig into every part of your life looking for ammunition. His voice was gentle but honest. It won't be easy, Elena. Are you absolutely sure you want to put yourself through that? I'm sure. Someone needs to speak for my mother, for what she tried to do. Elena opened her eyes, looking at a photograph on the shelf. Her and Vittoria, taken when Elena was maybe 6. Both of them laughing at something beyond the frame. She deserves to have her story told properly. Not just as a victim, but as someone who fought back. Then I'll make sure it's told that way. The prosecutors want my testimony about the laundering operations, but I'll make them include Vittoria's role, her courage. Lorenzo's voice dropped lower. I'll make sure everyone knows what an extraordinary woman she was, just like her daughter. They talked for another 10 minutes before the guards ended the call. Elena sat in the growing darkness afterward, holding the phone like a lifeline. 2 weeks until the trial. 14 days to prepare herself for what came next. She spent those 2 weeks rebuilding something resembling a normal life. She returned to her thesis work, though the Renaissance art that had once fascinated her now felt trivial compared to what she'd survived. She met with her advisor, who was remarkably understanding about her extended absence. She even had coffee with a few friends, though she couldn't tell them the truth about where she'd been or what she'd done. The lies felt necessary, but exhausting. Elena found herself missing the brutal honesty of Lorenzo's world, where at least everyone knew they were playing a dangerous game. Sophia checked in daily, updating her on security status and trial preparations. The prosecution was building an airtight case using Vittoria's evidence combined with Lorenzo's testimony. Domenico Santoro and 15 members of his organization faced charges ranging from money laundering to murder. The trial was expected to last weeks, maybe months. You don't have to testify, Sophia reminded her during one of their meetings. Lorenzo's testimony and the documents are enough for conviction. You could stay out of it entirely. But I won't. I need to do this. Elena looked at the photographs Sophia had brought. Crime scene photos from the night of the fire, evidence tags, official reports. Seeing it laid out so clinically made something inside her harden. My mother died in that house. I survived. Someone needs to stand up and say what that meant. What it cost. The night before the trial, Elena couldn't sleep. She paced her apartment until 3 a.m, rehearsing her testimony, trying to prepare for questions she couldn't anticipate. Finally, she gave up and made coffee, watching the sun rise over Rome from her window. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Good luck today. You're stronger than you know. L. Lorenzo. Somehow he'd found a way to reach her even from a secure facility. Elena held the phone against her heart and let herself believe it would be all right. The courthouse was a circus. Media trucks lined the streets, cameras everywhere, reporters shouting questions at anyone who entered. Elena wore dark sunglasses and let Sophia's team guide her through the crowd, ignoring the questions, the flashbulbs, the chaos. Inside, the building was quieter but no less tense. Prosecutors moved through hallways with boxes of evidence. Defense attorneys huddled with clients. And everywhere, police officers and security guards maintained order. Elena was led to a witness room to wait. The prosecution would call her after Lorenzo testified, after the foundation was laid. She sat alone in the small room, trying to calm her racing heart. An hour later, a prosecutor's assistant came to get her. He's finishing up now. You're next. Elena followed her down a corridor to the courtroom doors. Through the small window, she could see Lorenzo on the witness stand, speaking clearly and calmly into a microphone. Even in prison clothes, even surrounded by guards, he looked powerful, controlled. But when his eyes found hers through the window, something in his expression softened. A silent message. I'm here. You're not alone. Elena squared her shoulders and waited for her name to be called. The courtroom was packed. Journalists in the gallery, family members of victims, the accused sitting in a line of defendants. Domenico Santoro sat in the center, his face a mask of fury. When Elena entered, his eyes locked onto her with such hatred that she almost faltered. But then she saw Lorenzo being escorted to a seat near the prosecution table, and his presence steadied her. She took the stand, placed her hand on the Bible for the oath, and prepared to tell her mother's story. The lead prosecutor, Giulia Rossetti, approached with a kind smile. Signora Vescari, thank you for your courage in testifying today. I know this must be difficult. It is, but it's necessary. Elena's voice was steady, stronger than she felt. Can you tell the court about your mother, Vittoria Moretti? And Elena did. She talked about Vittoria's work as a bookkeeper, her attention to detail, her fierce sense of right and wrong. She talked about the day her mother must have discovered the money laundering, about the choice she'd made to collect evidence instead of looking away. Did your mother ever speak to you about what she'd found? Rossetti asked. Not directly. I was only 8, but the night she died, Elena took a breath. The night she died, she hid me in a closet and gave me a message. She told me to remember where the angels sleep. It took me 15 years to understand what she meant. Elena described the recovered memory, the red folder, the cemetery. She explained how her mother had hidden the evidence knowing she might not survive to use it herself. How Vittoria had trusted her daughter to finish what she started. The courtroom was silent as Elena spoke. Even Domenico seemed to be listening, his expression unreadable. Then came the defense attorney's cross-examination. He was younger than Elena expected, aggressive and sharp. Signora Vescari, you claim to have recovered memories from 15 years ago. But isn't it true that so-called recovered memories are notoriously unreliable? That they can be influenced by suggestion, by what people want to believe? My mother's message led me to real evidence. Physical documents that prove everything she collected. Or perhaps you and Signor Vescari fabricated this story together. After all, you married him in what many would call suspicious circumstances. A strategic alliance between families. Elena felt anger flash through her. My marriage to Lorenzo has nothing to do with my mother's evidence. Those documents existed long before I met him. Did they? Or did Lorenzo Vescari, a known criminal with access to forgers and document specialists, create them to eliminate his rivals? The attorney moved closer. Isn't it true, Signora, that you stand to benefit significantly from the Santoro family's downfall? That you're testifying not for justice, but for revenge? Objection, Rossetti called. Speculation and badgering the witness. Sustained, counselor, rephrase. But the damage was done. Elena could see the doubt being planted in the jury's minds. She looked at Lorenzo, who gave her the smallest nod. Tell the truth. That's all you can do. My mother died seeking justice, Elena said clearly. I'm here to honor that. Not for revenge. Not for money. Because she deserves to have someone speak for her. And I'm her daughter. That's my right and my responsibility. The attorney tried several more angles, but Elena held firm. When she was finally dismissed, she walked past the defendants with her head high, refusing to show fear. In the hallway outside, she collapsed against the wall, shaking. Sophia appeared immediately with water. You did beautifully, she said. Rossetti thinks your testimony was powerful. The jury believed you. Some of them, maybe. But that defense attorney planted enough doubt. Elena trailed off as Lorenzo emerged from the courtroom, his guards allowing him a brief moment. You were incredible, he said, stopping a few feet away. Everything I knew you'd be. They're trying to make it look like we fabricated everything together. Let them try. The evidence speaks for itself. Bank records, photographs, testimony from people who worked with your mother. It all corroborates her findings. Lorenzo glanced at his guards, who were watching closely. This is just the beginning. They'll attack harder as the trial goes on. But we knew that. How much longer can they keep you here, in the city, I mean? Through Domenico's trial, at least. After that, it depends on how many other cases need my testimony. His expression was troubled. Elena, there's something you should know. The prosecution offered me a deal, full immunity in exchange for testimony against all the families named in the evidence. Every single one. That's good, isn't it? That means you won't go to prison. It means I'll be testifying for years, case after case, making enemies of every criminal organization in Italy. Lorenzo's voice dropped. And it means witness protection. A new identity, new location, disappearing completely. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. They want you to disappear? To leave everything behind? Everyone, including you. The hallway seemed to tilt. Elena grabbed Sophia's arm for support. No, there has to be another way. There isn't. The prosecutor was clear. Full immunity requires full cooperation, and full cooperation means protection. They can't guarantee my safety otherwise. Lorenzo looked like the words were killing him. I haven't accepted yet. I told them I needed time to consider. What's there to consider? You can't just vanish. We can't... Elena couldn't finish the sentence. The future they'd been building, fragile as it was, crumbled in her mind. I know, but the alternative is 20 years in prison, maybe more. And even then, there's no guarantee I'd survive. The families have long reaches, Elena. They can get to people even behind bars. So those are my choices? Watch you disappear or watch you die in prison? Elena felt tears burning her eyes. That's not fair. We fought so hard to get here. Life isn't fair. You know that better than anyone. Lorenzo took a step closer, his guards tensing but allowing it. But I haven't decided. I wanted you to know what we're facing before I make any choice. When do you have to tell them? End of the week, after Domenico's verdict comes in. They stood in the hallway, separated by 3 feet and a gulf of impossible circumstances, while court officers moved around them and the machinery of justice ground forward. I should go, Lorenzo said finally. They're taking me back to the facility, but Elena, think about what you want. Really think about it. Because whatever I decide, it has to be something you can live with too. They led him away before she could respond. Elena watched him disappear down the corridor, flanked by guards, and felt the fragile hope she'd been nursing cracks straight down the middle. The trial continued for 3 more weeks. Elena attended every day, sitting in the gallery and watching the prosecution systematically dismantle Domenico Santoro's empire. Witness after witness testified to his crimes. Documents were entered into evidence. The case was overwhelming. Lorenzo testified 4 more times, each appearance revealing another layer of corruption. He was calm, precise, and devastatingly credible. The defense attorneys tried to discredit him, but his cooperation and obvious remorse made him sympathetic despite his crimes. Through it all, Elena watched from the gallery and tried not to think about the decision looming at the end of it all. Tried not to imagine Lorenzo disappearing into witness protection, becoming someone else entirely, beyond her reach forever. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. The jury had deliberated for 2 days, and the tension in the courtroom was suffocating when they filed back in. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. Elena held her breath. On the charge of money laundering, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of racketeering, guilty. Charge after charge, guilty verdicts on every count. Domenico Santoro sat stone-faced as his world collapsed around him. When the final guilty verdict was read, murder in the first degree, Elena saw something flicker across his face. Not remorse. Rage. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later, but everyone knew what it would be. Life in prison, no possibility of parole. Domenico Santoro's empire was finished. As guards led him away, Domenico's eyes found Lorenzo's across the courtroom. This isn't over, Vescari. You think you've won, but you've just signed your own death warrant. You and your wife both. Silence, the judge ordered, but the threat had been made. Clear and public. Lorenzo's face remained impassive, but Elena saw his jaw tighten. She saw him understand what she'd known the moment Domenico spoke. There would be no safety. Not for Lorenzo, and not for her. The families would never stop hunting them, which meant the choice had just become clear. After the courthouse cleared, Elena waited in the witness room until Sofia brought Lorenzo to her. The guards gave them privacy, standing just outside the door. You heard what he said, Lorenzo began, but Elena cut him off. Take the deal. Full immunity, witness protection, all of it. Her voice was steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. Disappear. Stay alive. Elena, I mean it. You have to survive this, Lorenzo. That's what matters. Not our future together. Not what we want. Your life. She moved closer, taking his hands. You chose truth over power. You chose to be better than what this life made you. Don't let that be for nothing. Take the deal. And leave you? Live the rest of my life never seeing you again? You'll be alive. That's enough. That has to be enough. Elena's voice broke. I love you too much to watch you die in prison or get killed by some assassin. At least this way, somewhere in the world you're safe. You're breathing. You get to have a life. Lorenzo pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I don't want a life without you in it. Neither do I, but we don't always get what we want. Elena pulled back just enough to look at his face, memorizing every detail. Promise me you'll take it. Promise me you'll disappear and stay safe and build something good with whatever time you have. No, only if you promise me the same. Build something good, Elena. Don't let this destroy you. I won't. I'll finish my degree. I'll work at a museum like I always wanted. I'll live the life my mother died to give me. She managed a broken smile. And sometimes, on quiet nights, I'll think about a man who loved me enough to choose truth over survival. That'll be enough. They held each other while the minutes ticked away, while the guards waited patiently outside, while the future they'd imagined together dissolved into might-have-beens. When Lorenzo finally left, Elena didn't watch him go. She sat in the empty room and let herself break completely, knowing it was the last time she'd allow it. Tomorrow, she'd start rebuilding. But tonight she grieved for what could never be. The call came 2 days later. Lorenzo had accepted the deal. Full immunity in exchange for testimony in 18 separate cases. He'd be relocating within the week to an undisclosed location with a new identity. Elena would never see him again. She spent those final days putting her own life back together. She met with university officials about completing her thesis. She looked at job postings at museums and galleries. She had coffee with friends and pretended her heart wasn't shattered. And she tried not to think about Lorenzo, somewhere in a secure facility, preparing to become someone else entirely. The night before his scheduled relocation, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? It's me. One last time. Lorenzo's voice was rough, strained. I leave tomorrow morning. I wanted to hear your voice before I go. Elena closed her eyes, tears already falling. How are you? Terrified. Ready? I don't know. He paused. They told me the rules. No contact with anyone from my old life. Ever. They'll be monitoring to make sure I comply. Then why are you calling? Because I needed you to know that I'll carry you with me. Every day, every moment. You changed my life, Elena. You made me want to be better. That doesn't end just because I have a new name in a new city. I'll carry you too, always. Elena pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart break all over again. Be happy, Lorenzo. Whoever you become, wherever you go, be happy. Promise me. I promise. And you do the same. Live fully. Love again if you can. Don't let what we had keep you from what you could have. I'll try. They were both crying now. Elena could hear it in his breathing, in the way his voice caught on certain words. I have to go, Lorenzo finally said. The guards are waiting. But Elena, thank you. For everything. For seeing me. For loving me despite what I was. For giving me a reason to choose redemption. Thank you for choosing it. For being brave enough to change. Goodbye, Elena. Goodbye, Lorenzo. The line went dead. Elena sat in her dark apartment, holding the silent phone, and let the grief wash over her completely. She cried for what they'd lost, for what they'd never have, for the cruel unfairness of finding love in the middle of a war. But she also cried with gratitude, because Lorenzo was alive, because he'd get a chance to start over, to build something good, because in the end, love had meant letting go. When the tears finally stopped, Elena wiped her face and looked around her apartment, at the life waiting to be lived, at the future stretching out before her, lonely but free. Her mother had died fighting for truth. Her father had died seeing justice served, and Lorenzo had sacrificed everything, including her, to honor what they'd started. Now it was Elena's turn. Time to build something worth all that sacrifice. Time to live a life that honored everyone she'd lost. Tomorrow, she'd start. But tonight, she allowed herself one final moment of grief for the man she'd loved and lost. For the future they dreamed of in safe houses and fortresses, in stolen moments between battles. For Lorenzo Vescari, whoever he was about to become. And for Elena Moretti, whoever she had yet to be. 3 years passed like water through Elena's fingers, sometimes fast, sometimes achingly slow, but always moving forward. She finished her thesis on Caravaggio's use of light and shadow, finding strange comfort in studying a painter who'd understood darkness so intimately. She took a position at the Galleria Borghese, working with Renaissance collections, losing herself in centuries-old art created by people who'd been dead longer than her problems had existed. Rome continued its ancient rhythms around her. The trials concluded, one after another. Domenico Santoro died in prison, 18 months into his sentence, officially a heart attack, though rumors suggested otherwise. The families fractured and reformed, weakened but not destroyed. And slowly, painfully, the city began to heal. Elena healed too, in her way. She moved to a new apartment, one without memories of that terrible night when Lorenzo had called to say goodbye. She reconnected with old friends, made new ones who knew nothing about her past. She dated occasionally, a professor, a journalist, an architect, but none of them lasted. None of them were him. She'd promised Lorenzo she'd try to love again. She tried. It just never took. Sophia checked in monthly, now working private security after the dissolution of Lorenzo's organization. She never mentioned him directly, respecting the clean break witness protection required, but sometimes she'd get a distant look in her eyes that told Elena she was thinking about him too. You should move on, Sophia said one evening over wine, 3 years to the day since Lorenzo had disappeared. He'd want you to be happy. I am happy, Elena replied, and it was almost true. She had work she loved, friends she valued, a life that felt purposeful. She'd even started a foundation in her mother's name, offering legal aid to people trying to expose corruption. I'm just not complete. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't always get everything we want. Sophia looked at her with understanding that came from her own losses. Maybe. But you deserve more than just okay. Elena thought about that conversation a week later when she received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address in Naples and a date 2 weeks away. Nothing else. No name, no explanation. Her first instinct was to throw it away. It could be a trap, some remnant of the old families seeking revenge. But something about the handwriting on the envelope made her pause. The careful, precise letters. The way the E in her name curved just slightly at the top. She'd seen that handwriting before, on notes Lorenzo had left her in the safe house, on the letter he'd written the night before the cemetery. Her hands were shaking as she showed it to Sophia. It could be him, Sophia said carefully. Or it could be someone using him as bait. After 3 years? Why now? I don't know. But Elena, witness protection doesn't allow contact. If this is really Lorenzo, he's violating his agreement. That puts him in danger. Then I have to go. I have to know. Elena looked at the address again, committing it to memory. Will you come with me? Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. We do this carefully. Full security precautions. If it's a trap, we're ready. The 2 weeks crawled by. Elena couldn't focus on work, couldn't sleep properly, couldn't stop imagining scenarios. Lorenzo had changed his mind, had found a way to come back. Or someone had discovered his new identity, and this was how they'd lure her into the open. Or it wasn't about Lorenzo at all, just some bizarre coincidence. The night before she was supposed to go to Naples, Elena stood in front of her bathroom mirror and barely recognized herself. 3 years had changed her. She was leaner, harder, with lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She looked like someone who'd survived a war, because she had. They drove to Naples the next morning, Sophia at the wheel with 2 additional security personnel following in a second car. The address led them to a small cafe in the Vomero district, tucked away on a narrow street with a view of the bay. "I'll go in first," Sophia said. "You wait until I signal it's clear." Elena watched from the car as Sophia entered the cafe, her hand near the concealed weapon at her hip. Minutes ticked by. Then Sophia appeared in the doorway and gave a subtle nod. Elena's heart hammered as she walked across the street and pushed open the cafe door. It was quiet inside, just a handful of customers scattered at small tables. Classical music played softly. The smell of coffee and fresh pastries filled the air. And in the back corner, sitting with his back to the wall and his eyes on the door, was a man she'd never seen before who was somehow completely familiar. He'd changed everything. His hair was shorter, lighter, touched with gray she didn't remember. He wore glasses that changed the shape of his face. He'd lost weight, or maybe redistributed it, carrying himself differently than the Lorenzo she'd known. Even his clothes were different, casual, unremarkable, nothing like the expensive suits he'd favored. But his eyes. The moment their eyes met, Elena knew. She crossed the cafe on legs that felt disconnected from her body and sat down across from him. Up close, she could see the changes even more clearly. Small scars that were new, lines that grief and time had carved deeper, a wedding ring on his finger that made her stomach drop. "You came," he said, and his voice was different too, softer somehow, without the edge of command it had always carried. "I wasn't sure you would." "You knew I would." Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. "What are you doing here, Lorenzo? You're supposed to be dead as far as anyone knows." There was an accident 6 months ago. The man in witness protection, the one I'd become. He died in a car crash. Burned beyond recognition, dental records confirmed the identity. Lorenzo, except he wasn't Lorenzo anymore, was he? Smiled sadly. "I'm technically a ghost now." "I don't understand." "The prosecutor who handled my deal, Giulia Rossetti, she died too. Brain aneurysm, completely natural. But she was the only one who knew where I'd been relocated, who I'd become. When she died, the files were sealed. I was lost in the system." He leaned back in his chair. "I realized I had a choice. Stay dead and truly disappear, or come back. Build something real instead of just hiding." Elena felt tears burning her eyes. "So you came back. Not to Rome, not to the life I had, but to Italy, yes. To a city where no one knows me, where I can be someone new." He gestured around the cafe. "I bought this place 8 months ago. I serve coffee and pastries. I go to the market every morning. I'm learning to paint, badly. I'm just a person, for the first time in my life." "And the ring?" Lorenzo looked down at his hand, twisting the band absently. "Part of the cover identity I'm maintaining. Makes people ask fewer questions. But there's no one, Elena. There hasn't been anyone since you." The words hung between them, weighted with 3 years of silence and longing and grief. "Why did you ask me to come?" Elena asked quietly. "After all this time, why risk contact?" "Because I'm dying." The words were so matter-of-fact that for a moment Elena didn't process them. Then they hit like a physical blow. "What?" "Cancer. Pancreatic, stage 4. The doctors give me maybe 6 months." Lorenzo's voice remained calm, like he was discussing the weather. "I don't have a lot of time left, and I realized I couldn't leave this world without seeing you one more time, without telling you what the past 3 years have taught me." Elena couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She just stared at this man who'd turned her world upside down, who'd disappeared into witness protection, who'd somehow found his way back to her only to tell her he was dying. "I'm sorry," Lorenzo continued. "I know this isn't fair. You've built a life, moved on like I asked you to, and here I am dragging you back into my chaos. But I needed you to know that loving you changed everything. You made me want to be better, and these past 3 years, even alone, I've tried to be that, to be worthy of what you saw in me." "Stop," Elena's voice cracked. "Just stop. You can't tell me you're dying like it's nothing. You can't—" She broke off, the tears finally falling. "We just found each other again. That's not enough time." "I know, but it's what we have." Lorenzo reached across the table, and after 3 years of not touching him, Elena took his hand. His grip was warm, solid, real. I've made my peace with it. The cancer, the time I have left. I just wanted you to know that every good thing I've done since I left Rome, I did thinking of you. The foundation I started here in Naples, helping kids get out of the life I was trapped in, that's because of you. Learning to live quietly, honestly, that's because of you. You saved me, Elena. Not just my life, but my soul. I don't want your gratitude. I want you to live. Elena was crying openly now, not caring who saw. There has to be treatment, options. I've explored them all. This kind of cancer, this advanced, there's nothing. I've accepted it. He squeezed her hand gently. But I have 6 months, maybe more if I'm lucky. And I was hoping, if you wanted, we could spend some of that time together. Not as Lorenzo and Elena, not as the people we were, just as two people who love each other, making the most of whatever time is left. Elena looked at him through her tears. At this man who'd been a stranger, an enemy, a protector, a lover, a ghost, who'd come back from the dead to offer her 6 months. It should have been an impossible choice. Her life in Rome, her work, everything she'd built, walking away from it, even temporarily, was insane. Yes, she said. Yes, I want that. Lorenzo's smile was like sunrise. Really? You're sure? I've spent 3 years trying to forget you and failing. I'm not wasting whatever time we have left. Elena wiped her eyes. But I have conditions. You let me help you. You don't try to protect me from what's coming. We face this together, honestly. Deal? Deal. They sat in that cafe for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Lorenzo told her about his new life in Naples, the foundation he'd started, the simple joys he'd discovered in living quietly. Elena told him about her work at the gallery, about the foundation in Vittoria's name, about the life she'd built from the ashes of their goodbye. It felt like coming home. Elena called Sofia that evening from her hotel room. I'm staying in Naples for a while. Don't ask me how long. It's him, isn't it? He's alive. I can't talk about it. But Sofia, I need you to handle some things in Rome for me. My apartment, work, everything. Can you do that? There was a long pause. Then, of course, whatever you need. But Elena, be careful. Even if he's supposed to be dead, there are people who... I know, we're being careful, I promise. Over the following weeks, Elena moved into a small apartment near Lorenzo's cafe. She didn't return to Rome, instead handling everything remotely. She took a leave of absence from the gallery, citing family matters. She let her friends believe she was traveling, sorting out her father's remaining estate. Only Sofia knew the truth, and Sofia, loyal to the end, kept her secrets. Elena and Lorenzo fell into a routine that was both strange and natural. Mornings at the cafe, where she learned to make espresso properly, and he taught her the Italian art of the perfect cornetto. Afternoons exploring Naples, seeing the city not as tourists, but as people who belonged there. Evenings cooking dinner together in his small apartment above the cafe, talking for hours about everything they'd missed in 3 years apart. And slowly, carefully, they learned to love each other again. Not the desperate, dangerous love forged in fire and violence. Something quieter now, deeper, built on choice rather than necessity. The cancer progressed exactly as the doctors predicted. Lorenzo grew thinner, more tired. He started chemotherapy even though it couldn't cure him, just buy time. Elena held his hand through the treatments, wiped his forehead when he was sick, and tried not to count the days slipping away. I'm sorry, he said one evening 4 months after she'd arrived. They were sitting on his small balcony, watching the sun set over the bay. This isn't what you signed up for, taking care of a dying man. Stop apologizing. This is exactly what I signed up for. Elena rested her head on his shoulder. In sickness and in health, remember? We said those vows even if we didn't mean them at the time. I meant them. Maybe not when I said them, but later. I meant every word. Me too. They were quiet for a while, watching the light fade from the sky. Then Lorenzo said quietly, I've been thinking about what comes after I'm gone. Don't. Elena, we have to talk about it. I've made arrangements, the cafe, the foundation, my savings. Everything goes to you. Not under my old name, obviously, but you'll be taken care of. I don't want your money. I want you. I know, but you can't have that. So instead, you'll have the means to keep doing good work, to honor your mother's memory and mine, to build something that lasts. He turned to look at her. Promise me you'll do that. Keep fighting the good fight, even when I'm gone. Only if you promise to fight too, to take every treatment, to squeeze every possible day out of the time we have left. Don't give up just because the ending is written. I promise, every day until the last one. He kept that promise. Through the pain and the exhaustion and the gradual failing of his body, Lorenzo fought. He worked at the cafe as long as he could. He continued running the foundation, finding homes and opportunities for kids trapped in the life he'd escaped. He lived fully and fiercely, refusing to surrender before he had to. But cancer is patient. And 6 months after Elena arrived in Naples, Lorenzo collapsed at the cafe. The hospital told them what they already knew, weeks now, maybe days. There was nothing more they could do except manage the pain. "I want to go home," Lorenzo told them. "Not the hospital. Home." Elena took him back to the apartment above the cafe. Sofia arrived the next day, having finally extracted the full truth from Elena during a tearful phone call. She helped set up hospice care, made sure Lorenzo was comfortable, then quietly took over running the cafe so Elena could focus on what mattered. "Thank you," Elena told her. "For everything, for being here." "He was a good man," Sofia said. "Different at the end than the beginning. Better. That's worth something." The final days were hard. Lorenzo drifted in and out of consciousness, lucid moments interspersed with confusion and pain. But Elena never left his side. She read to him from the poetry books he loved. She told him stories about her work, about the foundation bearing her mother's name. She held his hand and reminded him he wasn't alone. On the last night, Lorenzo woke from sleep with unusual clarity. The morphine was still in his system, but his eyes were focused, present. "Elena, I'm here." She moved closer, taking his hand. "I need to tell you something about the night of the cemetery, when you locked yourself in the mausoleum." He paused, gathering strength. "I knew you'd do it. Knew you'd try to save me, even if it meant risking yourself. That's when I understood." "Understood what?" "That loving someone isn't about protecting them from the world. It's about trusting them to make their own choices, even when those choices terrify you." Lorenzo's grip tightened weakly. "You taught me that. You taught me that love is partnership, not possession, and that made all the difference. You taught me things too, how to be strong, how to fight for what matters, how to choose truth even when it costs everything." Elena's tears fell on their joined hands. "We saved each other, Lorenzo, in every way that matters." "Yes, we did." His breathing was labored now, each word an effort. "I'm not afraid of what comes next, because I got to love you. I got to be better because of you. That's more than I deserved. You deserved everything, a long life, happiness, peace. You deserved all of it. I got what I needed. That's enough." Lorenzo's eyes were closing again. "Don't be sad for too long. Live, Elena. Really live. That's how you honor me." "I will. I promise. I love you. First, last, always. I love you too." Lorenzo took one more breath, let it out slowly, and was gone. Elena sat with him as the night deepened into dawn, holding his hand, feeling the warmth slowly leave his body. When the hospice nurse came to check, Elena nodded silently. It was done. She'd known it was coming, had prepared herself as much as anyone could, but the grief still hit like a tidal wave, drowning her in the finality of it all. Lorenzo Vescari, or whatever name he'd taken in witness protection, whatever name he'd used to buy the cafe and start his foundation, was gone. The man who'd been a monster and a savior, a captor and a liberator, was gone. And Elena was alone again, except she wasn't. Not really. The funeral was small and private. Just Elena, Sofia, and a handful of people from the neighborhood who'd known Lorenzo as the kind cafe owner who always had time to talk. They buried him in Naples under his assumed name, in a cemetery overlooking the bay he'd loved. Elena stood at the grave after everyone else had left, looking at the simple headstone that bore a name that wasn't his but would have to do. "I'll keep the promises," she told him. "All of them. I'll live fully. I'll keep fighting. I'll make sure your foundation continues helping people escape the life you were trapped in. And someday, when enough time has passed, maybe I'll even be happy again." The wind from the bay was warm on her face as she turned to leave. Behind her, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Ahead of her, the city waited. And beyond that, a future she'd have to navigate alone. But she wasn't the same Elena who'd married a stranger in a penthouse made of glass and lies. She was stronger now. Braver. Forged in fire and loss and love that had chosen truth over survival. She would survive this too. She would honor Lorenzo's memory by living the life he'd fought so hard to give her. Elena walked out of the cemetery with her shoulders back and her head high, carrying her grief like armor. She had work to do. 2 years later, Elena stood in a renovated building in one of Rome's struggling neighborhoods. The Vittoria Moretti Foundation had grown beyond her wildest expectations, funded partially by her work at the gallery, but mostly by the considerable assets Lorenzo had left her. They offered legal aid, job training, and protection for people trying to expose corruption or escape dangerous situations. Today, they were opening a new youth center, partnering with Lorenzo's Naples Foundation to create opportunities for at-risk kids. The irony wasn't lost on Elena, using money from a former mob boss to save children from becoming what he'd been. But maybe that was the point. Maybe redemption was taking the broken pieces of the past and building something better. Signora Moretti? A young woman approached, probably 18 or 19. I wanted to thank you. My brother was trapped in a situation with one of the families. Your foundation helped him get out, start over. He's in university now because of you. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but smiled. Not because of me. Because he was brave enough to ask for help. I'm just glad we could provide it. After the opening ceremony, after the speeches and the ribbon cutting and the photographs, Elena found a quiet corner and pulled out her phone. She scrolled to a photo she kept hidden in a locked folder. Lorenzo in the Naples cafe, laughing at something she'd said, looking more at peace than she'd ever seen him. We did it, she whispered to the image. We built something that matters. Something that lasts. Her phone buzzed with a new message. Another person seeking help, another opportunity to make a difference. Elena took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and got to work. The rain started as she left the building hours later, a soft summer storm that washed the city clean. Elena tilted her face up to it, letting it mix with the tears she'd been holding back all day. She thought about her mother, who'd died seeking justice. About her father, who'd lived long enough to see it served. About Lorenzo, who'd chosen redemption over survival, and taught her that love meant trusting someone to make their own choices. They were all gone now. But their legacies lived on in the foundation, in the people they'd helped, in the corruption they'd exposed, in the lives they'd changed. Elena walked through the rain-washed streets of Rome, heading home to her apartment filled with art and memories and the quiet life she'd built. She was 30 years old, alone, and free. She carried scars from battles most people would never understand. She'd loved a man she could never publicly acknowledge, married a stranger who'd become her salvation, and survived a war fought in shadows and silence. And somehow, impossibly, she was happy. Not the uncomplicated happiness of someone who'd never known loss, but the hard-won peace of someone who'd faced the worst the world could offer and chosen to keep fighting anyway. She thought about Lorenzo's final words. Live, Elena. Really live. She was trying. Every day, she was trying. And in the rain-soaked streets of Rome, with the weight of the past on her shoulders and the possibility of the future stretching ahead, that felt like enough. The empire had fallen. The war had ended. The monsters had been defeated or redeemed. And in the quiet after the storm, Elena Moretti walked forward into whatever came next, carrying the love and loss and lessons of everyone who'd shaped her. Alone, but never lonely. Free, but never forgetting. Living the life they'd all died to give her. Finally, completely, bravely alive.